we see today. Let's hear something you prefer. Tina, what? I don't know who that is. 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 Rip, though. I don't know who that is. Don't do this to me, man. Vangelis was the composer of Chariot of Fire and the Blade Runner OST. Cool. Thanks, Gerson. Yeah, there's some bugs down there. A little cloudy in Florida today, huh? Either that or the ISO's cranked on that camera. Anyway, let's see. Let me put on something here.
Tomorrow from Cape Canaveral Space Force Station at 6:54 p.m. Eastern Time. Today, joining us is a distinguished panel of leadership to talk to you about this mission.
This is the leadership panel. I'll put this on, and I'm going to grab some food.
NASA's
This is on NASA
Administrator, Janet Petro, Director of NASA's Kennedy Space Center, Catherine Leaders,
I'll be back in a moment.
Associate Administrator for the Space Operations Mission Directorate, NASA astronaut Butch Wilmore, NASA astronaut Mike Fink, and NASA astronaut Sunny Williams. Our panel will be taking questions from media here in the room as well as over the phone. But before we get to your questions, they'll each take a moment for opening remarks. And Bob Cabana, we'll start with you.
Well, thanks so much, Jasmine. It is absolutely great to be back in Florida here at KSC for this launch of Boeing's OFT-2. And I was looking at this monitor over here on my right and seeing that rocket, that spacecraft on that ULA Atlas V with the green and the blue of the ocean and clear skies. It just really looks great, and I can't wait to have a successful demonstration of this vehicle on orbit so that we get that dissimilar redundancy that we need in our ability to get crews to the International Space Station. So right now, vehicle looks good, weather looks good, and I am really looking forward to a launch tomorrow evening. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to KSC Center Director Janet Petro.
Hey, thank you, Bob. And I'd like to welcome everyone to the Kennedy Space Center. You know, we really have a super busy year with all the operations here on the center. We have something like 65 launches on our manifest this year. And earlier this morning, we launched our 20th launch of this calendar year. But I am really excited for tomorrow's launch to be able to support the entire Boeing team and get that second capability of transporting our astronauts to and from the space station with this first test flight is super exciting and really looking forward to it. Kathy, over to you.
Thanks, Janet. So it's been a busy spring. I don't know about you guys, but I'm very proud of both the ISS and the commercial crew teams, you know, that have maintained their cadence as we've been working through our first private astronaut mission and then getting our crew 4 increment crew up and crew 3 down. And then here we're getting ready for our uncrewed demonstration of our Boeing crew transportation system. I want to emphasize this is a test flight. You know, we're going through, this is a demonstration mission. It's a NASA launch and reentry. Just want to make that point. We've been working really hard. The team's been working really hard to get ready for this. And this is going to be, we learned a lot from the first uncrewed demo. We're going to learn a lot from the second one, working through getting to the International Space Station. First time we're using our NASA docking system on the new IDA, and so very exciting time. We've had to do a ton of work with the team. I know Steve and Joel have been talking to you about all the work that they've been doing and getting ready for this time tomorrow. And so we'll learn. We're going to take this one step at a time. I think you guys may be tired of me saying that, but we're going to take this one step at a time. And we're going to use this learning for us to then be able to fly our crews. And I know I'm pretty excited about this. I have a few people here on my left here that are probably almost as excited as I am. I have another person on my right that keeps telling me he's ready to fly soon. Let me turn it over to Butch, and he can talk to you about all the things that they've been doing to really make sure that this is a vehicle that we can fly in on the next time.
Yeah. Thank you, Kathy. Well, obviously, we are more than thrilled to be here. And we're also very, very jealous because this is human spaceflight, and Rosie, the mannequin, is the one that gets to take the trip instead of us. But obviously, this is part of the evolution of test. Spaceflight test is hard. It is not easy. And it's got a little bit of a misnomer that the crews, typically crews are in training to fly in space, but this is different because this is flight test. So we've been involved in the process of developmental flight test, experimental developmental flight test. So we are part of the testing processes, both hardware and software, development of the procedures, and the list goes on. And it has been a thrilling and exciting ride and exciting journey, and that's why we're thrilled to be here. Like I said, the standard part of the evolution in test, this is it. Orbital flight test, we need to go up, fly the spacecraft without humans on it, demonstrate the automated systems, and come back safely. And like I said, we're thrilled for this because the next one is us. And with that, I'll hand it over to Mike.
Yeah, Butch, good points. We're all three graduates of military test pilot school, so we're going to be focused on for this mission, the flight test objectives, and as well as in getting ready for the flight test objectives for the crew flight tests, with the goal of certification at the end, so that we as NASA can have regularly scheduled dissimilar, redundant flights to the International Space Station, so we can go up, one flight with Boeing, one flight with SpaceX. So in order to get there, we're going to be paying attention on this mission to the artificial vision system called VESTA, which we didn't get a chance to work or see in action on the first orbital flight test. We didn't get close to the space station. So we're going to see how the automated docking system works with the artificial vision system all the way through the NASA docking system. We're going to follow along with our lucky ISS crewmates who are aboard the space station, mainly Chell and Bob, and the rest of the crew will be supporting, but they're going to get inside Starliner and get some flight test objectives done for us, take some of the cargo out. I think they're going to bring some cargo back, and we'll look forward and watch the parachutes and the airbags, and looking forward to a nice landing in the desert. And of course, we're going to have a chance to step inside the spacecraft this evening to finish up some comm checks and switches, which I think is a tradition for astronauts to help set up the spacecraft before launch. And we're going to give Rosie a nice high five on the way out, because we are, like Butch said, a little jealous of Rosie.
Thanks, Mike. Just to follow up a couple things that you mentioned, Boeing, of course, is trusting us. ULA is trusting us to go up there and not mess up their spacecraft. We're super excited to get in it. Maybe leave a note for Chell and Bob and say good luck. But we're really looking forward to this spacecraft coming home, because that's when the rest of the work will start to happen and we'll get ready for the crewed flight test. One of the things that Rosie doesn't do, she doesn't breathe, and so we will be the first ones when we get in it to be the breathers, the creators of carbon dioxide. So we want the spacecraft to get back so we can start testing the environmental control system with the interaction with people. So there's a lot of work ahead of us before we get to the crewed flight, but we're chomping at the bit. We're ready for this spacecraft to go up to the space station, be really successful, come back, to have a nice soft landing, and then we'll be ready for the follow-on work for the crewed flight test.
Great. Thank you all for those opening remarks. Always great to hear from our leadership and our NASA astronauts. So we will start our Q&A portion of today's briefing. We are taking questions here in the room from the media as well as over the phone. In the interest of time, we do ask that you limit yourself to one question, and please state who you'd like to answer. So we'll start off here in the room, here in this front row.
Marcia Dunn, Associated Press for Butch and Mike. Talk about how you're going to be chasing the flight. Are you going to Houston for docking, New Mexico for touchdown? And it's been a long wait, and how difficult has that been for both of you, and how important is it for this flight to really go well?
That's a good question, Marcia. I don't feel like we've been waiting to start off. We've been busy working. We are covering all of the mission. We're here for launch. I will be in the Boeing Mission Control Center. We will fly back very quickly, and we will be in Mission Control. I'll be in Mission Control. We'll be at different places for launch, different places during the actual rendezvous and docking, and observing how the interaction from Mission Control and the spacecraft, which we can, we've done a lot of training simulations and also developmental simulations, so we work well together. But to see it in action will be good. Firsthand, we will obviously want to be there. And we'll have other parts of the mission that will also be directly and deeply involved with. And I'll let Mike talk a little bit about that as far as the interaction with the crew when the crew on board gets in spacecraft and such.
Yeah, we're as we talked about, all three of us have been working with Boeing on the flight test objectives for this orbital flight test, and we had a nice briefing with the ISS crew a few days ago, and we'll be following along. Of course, the Boeing mission operations team will be managing the Starliner portion of the mission. We'll be sitting with them and watching, but they're definitely going to be doing a great job in managing the mission. But the things that we're going to be able to observe will help us with our missions coming up. But also, we'll be able to have we're looking forward to the debrief with the ISS crew at the end of this mission to see what they think of Starliner and any comments or improvements or things that they really like about Starliner.
Butch and Mike, thank you for those comments. We are going to go to the phone lines next. We have Raymond Skiba from Wired Magazine. Raymond, are you with us?
Yes, it's Ramin. I just wanted to ask, so assuming this flight goes according to plan, approximately when will be the first crewed flight, and will all three of you be on it?
Well, I'll answer that question. I know that all three of them want to be on it, but I think that one of the key things, and we talked about this a bunch about, that this is a test flight, right? And so we are getting our crewed flight test vehicle ready to go by the end of the year. The Boeing folks are working hard to get it there and ready to go. But one of the things we have to do is do this mission and take the learning that we will get. We know we'll have learning out of this mission, and then lay that into our plans and our schedule with the Boeing folks after we return. So I think when that happens, we'll also look at what's the crew complement for our crewed missions that we have next year and the other activities we have going on, and we'll make a final selection for the crewed flight test vehicle at that time. So I kind of ask everybody to maybe wait on that particular answer until the summertime. I do feel like it's important that we first of all, get through this particular mission. We've talked a lot about taking this one step at a time. And then we need to make sure that there isn't anything we need to update or fix on the spacecraft that we're planning to have ready by the end of the year. And then lay out the full schedule for everybody and give the Reed and the crew office time to go look at all the selections and make sure we're putting the right people in the right places. But I promise we will have an answer for you this summer.
Thank you, Kathy, and thank you, Ramin. We have quite a few in the front row, so let's come down here. Thank you.
Hi, Ken Kramer, Space Up Close. Thank you for doing this, and good luck to everybody. My question is for the astronauts. I want to ask you in particular about the oxidizer isolation valves. What insight have you had into that testing? Are you satisfied with the testing? You satisfied with the fixes? Can you please talk about any of you about that, please?
Well, we all divide up the different responsibilities. We're all aware, and different ones of us focus more in depth on the specific different hardware, software issues. And actually, that one's for Sunny.
Yeah, I've been lucky. I've been following a lot of the hardware stuff. So yeah, that is a continual stream of information that's coming from Boeing and working with our NASA engineering. So yeah, we've been following every single step of the way. It's a hard problem for them to solve, and they've been doing a great job. Actually, I was just talking to the program manager while we were at rollout this morning. They have another cycle of the valves once the now that the spacecraft is at the launch pad. And that's every time they cycle the valves, they are getting a little bit more confident that their fixes in place are working. So yes, in the long run, we've been following step by step all the hardware, and then it's great to see it actually come to fruition as they'll cycle the valves one more time before we get ready to go. And it's nice weather, which is good.
Great, thank you for those answers. We have some more down here in the front of the room, if we can go to that side.
Irene Klotz with Aviation Week. Maybe for Mike, since you brought this up about the test objectives for OFT-2, just was wondering if there's anything that's been changed or tweaked since the last launch attempt in last August.
Yeah, the flight test objectives for OFT-2 have stayed pretty much the same. I think there's going to be other testing objectives and more attention to our to the valves and the propulsion system, but those were never really part of the but the original flight test objectives. So we've had a chance to reevaluate a few things on the capsule. So we have a few tweaks to the procedures for the ISS crew, but it's pretty much the same mission from the crew perspective and from the flight test perspective as we had for last August.
Thank you for that. We have a very active front row, so if we get this gentleman right here in the center, thank you.
Thanks. Joey Roulette with Reuters. Has NASA, or I guess this one's for Kathy, has NASA and Boeing discussed at all what would happen if, I guess from a broader test timeline perspective, what would happen if this mission ends again without Boeing Starliner docking to the station? And I guess another way of wording that is if, other test objectives are met, could you see Boeing flying CFT or flying humans without having demonstrated a space station docking, or is that an absolute must?
That's a great question, because we actually kind of had been struggling with this after the first attempt that we had. And we had two teams looking at what did we need to do if we didn't refly, and what did we need to do and be able to prove out if our next mission was a crewed flight test. So, we make all of our decisions with data, and so it would have to be with, what happened, what we got done, what objectives we finished, what was the issues we had, and then we'd have to do the same thing we were going to do the last time, methodically work through and lay out the options, and what could you do for us to be confident before we fly. Joey, we're not going to fly unless we feel like we've brought down the risk we need to on the ground or through other demonstrations before we fly our crews, and so we'd have to go through that same process.
Thank you, Kathy. We have one more over here in the front row.
Hi, Jeff Faust of Space News. For the astronauts, I'm just curious what your level of confidence is in the vehicle compared to, say, last August before the original OFT-2 flight, or back in 2019 at the original OFT. Knowing now the issues that have come up since then, do you feel more confident that not only those issues have been resolved, but there's less such a chance of other unknown issues coming up?
I'll just very briefly, we wouldn't be here right now if we weren't confident that this would be a successful mission. But as you mentioned, there are always unknown unknowns. That's what historically has always gotten us, right, is those things that we don't know about and we don't expect. We're ready. This spacecraft is ready. These teams are ready. Boeing is ready. ULA is ready. The mission ops folks that will control the spacecraft in space are ready, and we're excited.
Thank you. We have another question here in the center aisle of the room.
Hi, Manuel Masanti from Debate, covering the space program in Spanish. How are you? Besides, once the Starliner is docked with the station, is there any particular activity that the astronauts on board are going to be to do inside Starliner, besides transferring cargo?
So yes, one of our test objectives is to make sure that Starliner is ready for people to be inside when we're docked. So that means, for example, there's a hardline communication system and a radio communication system between Starliner and the ISS. Now, of course, Rosie will not speak very much in English or Spanish, unfortunately, but we'll bring in the ISS crew, and they'll put on a headset and also the handheld mic, and we'll do some of the communications between back and forth, so that when we get up there, we know that it will work. Or if there's any trouble, we go and fix it. So there's a lot of things with the interface with the International Space Station that the Space Station crew will help us with.
All right, thank you so much for that, Mike Fink. Do we have any other questions here in the room? Oh, yes, here in the corner.
Hey, Irene Klotz, Aviation Week. Could someone just give us an update on if the hatch has been closed now and weather outlook for tomorrow? And when you were out at the pad today, was that your one and only chance to like go up in Starliner, or is that still to come for the cruise?
There is opportunity, as Mike mentioned earlier. I will not be here. I'm actually going to be busy later, but they're going to do the comm checks. So the white room that will be maneuvered in position where they can get, and they will open the hatch. It's been closed, obviously, for the rollout. And then we'll go back inside Starliner, go through some a little bit of switch list verification, and also verify the communication system, the various ways that we can communicate. We'll test all those out, and then we'll get out and, of course, go through the standard processes of closing the hatch and doing all those things to get ready for the launch. So those things are yet to
We have a
happen.
date with Rosie tonight and a high five at the end.
What time is hatch closure supposed to happen?
It
For
depends
flight?
on how long the comm checks go. We have different opportunities with the TDRS satellite. So if everything goes right the first time, we should be finished with our part of the closeout around 10 or 11 p.m. But it could go longer. There's a team from Boeing, the blue team, and they're also joined with a team from United Launch Alliance, and they'll be closing the hatch, I believe, somewhere about roughly about 4 hours before the launch. So the hatch probably will stay open until tomorrow morning.
And, I mean, so this is a good practice session for us. Like, we learned a lot the last time, and hatch closures and timing of hatch closures is a big part of the timeline and making sure. So this is an opportunity for the team to really refine their procedures for that too. So like Mike said, as part of our preparations for the timeline, it's about 4 hours out. You know, the weather's looking good. Bob already told us the weather's looking good. The weather just needs to hold looking good, and we're ready for 6:53 tomorrow evening.
Thank you for that. Do we have any more questions here in the room? All right, seeing none, that will do it for today's briefing. I want to thank all of the media for joining us here in the room and also over the phone lines. A big thank you to our panel for joining us today. As a reminder, liftoff of the OFT-2 test flight is scheduled for tomorrow, May 19th at 6:54 p.m. Eastern Time. Live coverage will begin on NASA TV as well as nasa.gov/live at 6 p.m. And today, in just about 15 minutes, there will also be a social briefing on NASA's social channels. You can go to YouTube/NASA Kennedy or Facebook/NASA Kennedy. We thank you all for joining us today, and until next time, go NASA, go Boeing, and go OFT-2.
Hey fellas, yeah, I'm still cooking up some food here, so I'm just gonna keep it on NASA TV, and then we'll go from there. Yeah, so be back momentarily. I'm pretty sure they'll have some kind of coverage going on this old thing. Yeah, okay, leadership briefing. Cool. All right, I'll be right back, just finishing up cooking food. No, it's just, I am a ventriloquist and I practice every day. He has sunglasses. He has a hat. We are both ventriloquists. We are both ventriloquists and we practice every day. Alright, I'll be back in a second for real.
Tranquility Base here. The Eagle has landed. Roger, Tranquility. We copy you on the ground.
New possibilities are opening up for scientific cooperation between countries.
1, 0, 0.
Liftoff. Americans return to space as Discovery clears the tower.
Discovery, go and throttle up.
Discovery, Roger. Go for deploy. Everybody in the shuttle program, the crew is go for launch. Roger. Nice to be in orbit.
We have followed in their footsteps to get us where we are today.
Hello and welcome to NASA's Kennedy Space Center in Florida for the NASA leadership briefing of the agency's Boeing Orbital Flight Test 2. I'm Jasmine Hopkins with NASA Communications. The OFT-2 test flight will test the end-to-end capabilities of Boeing's Starliner spacecraft, and it will provide helpful data for NASA to certify it for future human spaceflight missions to the International Space Station. Starliner will take flight aboard a United Launch Alliance Atlas V rocket tomorrow from Cape Canaveral Space Force Station at 6:54 p.m. Eastern Time. Today, joining us is a distinguished panel of leadership to talk to you about this mission. Starting from my left, we have Bob Cabana, NASA's Associate Administrator, Janet Petro, Director of NASA's Kennedy Space Center, Catherine Leaders, Associate Administrator for the Space Operations Mission Directorate, NASA astronaut Butch Wilmore, NASA astronaut Mike Fink, and NASA astronaut Sunny Williams. Our panel will be taking questions from media here in the room as well as over the phone. But before we get to your questions, they'll each take a moment for opening remarks. And Bob Cabana, we'll start with you.
Well, thanks so much, Jasmine. It is absolutely great to be back in Florida here at KSC for this launch of Boeing's OFT-2. And I was looking at this monitor over here on my right and seeing that rocket, that spacecraft on that ULA Atlas V with the green and the blue of the ocean and clear skies. It just really looks great, and I can't wait to have a successful demonstration of this vehicle on orbit so that we get that dissimilar redundancy that we need in our ability to get crews to the International Space Station. So right now, vehicle looks good, weather looks good, and I am really looking forward to a launch tomorrow evening. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to KSC Center Director Janet Petro.
Hey, thank you, Bob. And I'd like to welcome everyone to the Kennedy Space Center. You know, we really have a super busy year with all the operations here on the center. We have something like 65 launches on our manifest this year. And earlier this morning, we launched our 20th launch of this calendar year. But I am really excited for tomorrow's launch to be able to support the entire Boeing team and get that second capability of transporting our astronauts to and from the space station with this first test flight is super exciting and really looking forward to it. Kathy, over to you.
Thanks, Janet. So it's been a busy spring. I don't know about you guys, but I'm very proud of both the ISS and the commercial crew teams, that have maintained their cadence as we've been working through our first private astronaut mission and then getting our crew 4 increment crew up and crew 3 down. And then here we're getting ready for our uncrewed demonstration of our Boeing crew transportation system. I want to emphasize this is a test flight. We're going through, this is a demonstration mission. It's a NASA launch and reentry. Just want to make that point. We've been working really hard. The team's been working really hard to get ready for this. And this is going to be, we learned a lot from the first uncrewed demo. We're going to learn a lot from the second one, working through getting to the International Space Station. First time we're using our NASA docking system on the new IDA, and so very exciting time. We've had to do a ton of work with the team. I know Steve and Joel have been talking to you about all the work that they've been doing and getting ready for this time tomorrow. And so we'll learn. We're going to take this one step at a time. I think you guys may be tired of me saying that, but we're going to take this one step at a time. and we're going to use this learning for us to then be able to fly our crews. And I know I'm pretty excited about this. I have a few people here on my left here that are probably almost as excited as I am. I have another person on my right that keeps telling me he's ready to fly soon. Let me turn it over to Butch, and he can talk to you about all the things that they've been doing to really make sure that this is a vehicle that we can fly in on the next time.
Yeah. Thank you, Kathy. Well, obviously, we are more than thrilled to be here. And we're also very, very jealous because this is human space flight, and Rosie, the mannequin, is the one that gets to take the trip instead of us. But obviously, this is part of the evolution of test. Spaceflight test is hard. It is not easy. And it's a little bit of a misnomer that the crews, typically crews are in training to fly in space, but this is different because this is flight test. So we've been involved in the process of developmental flight test, experimental developmental flight test. So we are part of the testing processes, both hardware and software, development of the procedures, and the list goes on. And it has been a thrilling and exciting ride and exciting journey, and that's why we're thrilled to be here. Like I said, the standard part of the evolution in test, this is it. Orbital flight test, we need to go up, fly the spacecraft without humans on it, demonstrate the automated systems, and come back safely. And like I said, we're thrilled for this because the next one is us. And with that, I'll hand it over to Mike.
Yeah, Butch, good points. We're all three graduates of military test pilot school, so we're going to be focused on for this mission, the flight test objectives, and as well as getting ready for the flight test objectives for the crew flight test, with the goal of certification at the end, so that we as NASA can have regularly scheduled dissimilar, redundant flights to the International Space Station, so we can go up, one flight with Boeing, one flight with SpaceX. So in order to get there, we're going to be paying attention on this mission to the artificial vision system called VESTA, which we didn't get a chance to work or see in action on the first orbital flight test. We didn't get close to the space station. So we're going to see how the automated docking system works with the artificial vision system all the way through the NASA docking system. We're going to follow along with our lucky ISS crewmates who are aboard the space station, mainly Chell and Bob, and the rest of the crew will be supporting, but they're going to get inside Starliner and get some flight test objectives done for us, take some of the cargo out. I think they're going to bring some cargo back, and we'll look forward and watch the parachutes and the airbags, and looking forward to a nice landing in the desert. And of course, we're going to have a chance to step inside the spacecraft this evening to finish up some comm checks and switches, which I think is a tradition for astronauts to help set up the spacecraft before launch. And we're going to give Rosie a nice high five on the way out, because we are, like Butch said, a little jealous of Rosie.
Thanks, Mike. Just to follow up a couple things that you mentioned, Boeing, of course, is trusting us. ULA is trusting us to go up there and not mess up their spacecraft. We're super excited to get in it. Maybe leave a note for Chell and Bob and say good luck. But we're really looking forward to this spacecraft coming home, because that's when the rest of the work will start to happen, and we'll get ready for the crewed flight test. One of the things that Rosie doesn't do, she doesn't breathe, and so we will be the first ones when we get in it to be the breathers, the creators of carbon dioxide. So we want this spacecraft to get back so we can start testing the environmental control system with the interaction with people. So there's a lot of work ahead of us before we get to the crewed flight, but we're chomping at the bit. We're ready for this spacecraft to go up to the space station, be really successful, come back, to have a nice soft landing, and then we'll be ready for the follow-on work for the crewed flight test.
Great. Thank you all for those opening remarks. Always great to hear from our leadership and our NASA astronauts. So we will start our Q&A portion of today's briefing. We are taking questions here in the room from the media as well as over the phone. In the interest of time, we do ask that you limit yourself to one question, and please state who you'd like to answer. So we'll start off here in the room, here in this front row.
Marcia Dunn, Associated Press for Butch and Mike. Talk about how you're going to be chasing the flight. Are you going to Houston for docking, New Mexico for touchdown? And it's been a long wait, and how difficult has that been for both of you, and how important is it for this flight to really go well?
That's a good question, Marcia. I don't feel like we've been waiting to start off. We've been busy working. We are covering all of the mission. We're here for launch. I will be in the Boeing Mission Control Center. We will fly back very quickly, and we will be in Mission Control. I'll be in Mission Control. We'll be at different places for launch, different places during the actual rendezvous and docking, and observing how the interaction from Mission Control and the spacecraft, which we can, we've done a lot of training simulations and also developmental simulations, so we work well together. But to see it in action will be good. Firsthand, we will obviously want to be there. And we'll have other parts of the mission that will also be directly and deeply involved with. And I'll let Mike talk a little bit about that as far as the interaction of the crew when the crew on board gets in spacecraft and such.
Yeah, we're as we talked about, all three of us have been working with Boeing on the flight test objectives for this orbital flight test, and we had a nice briefing with the ISS crew a few days ago, and we'll be following along. Of course, the Boeing mission operations team will be managing the Starliner portion of the mission. We'll be sitting with them and watching, but they're definitely going to be doing a great job in managing the mission. But the things that we're going to be able to observe will help us with our missions coming up. But also, we'll be able to have we're looking forward to the debrief with the ISS crew at the end of this mission to see what they think of Starliner and any comments or improvements or things that they really like about Starliner.
Butch and Mike, thank you for those comments. We are going to go to the phone lines next. We have Raymond Skiba from Wired Magazine. Raymond, are you with us?
Yes, it's Ramin. I just wanted to ask, so assuming this flight goes according to plan, approximately when will be the first crewed flight, and will all three of you be on it?
Well, I'll answer that question. I know that all three of them want to be on it, but I think that one of the key things, and we talked about this a bunch, about that this is a test flight, right? And so we are getting our crewed flight test vehicle ready to go by the end of the year. The Boeing folks are working hard to get it there and ready to go. But one of the things we have to do is do this mission and take the learning that we will get. We know we'll have learning out of this mission, and then lay that into our plans and our schedule with the Boeing folks after we return. So I think when that happens, we'll also look at what's the crew complement for our crewed missions that we have next year and the other activities we have going on, and we'll make a final selection for the crewed flight test vehicle at that time. So I kind of ask everybody to maybe wait on that particular answer until the summertime. I do feel like it's important that we first of all, get through this particular mission. We've talked a lot about taking this one step at a time. And then we need to make sure that there isn't anything we need to update or fix on the spacecraft that we're planning to have ready by the end of the year. And then lay out the full schedule for everybody and give the Reed and the crew office time to go look at all the selections and make sure we're putting the right people in the right places. But I promise we will have an answer for you this summer.
Thank you, Kathy, and thank you, Ramin. We have quite a few in the front row, so let's come down here. Thank you.
Hi, Ken Kramer, Space Up Close. Thank you for doing this, and good luck to everybody. My question is for the astronauts. I want to ask you in particular about the oxidizer isolation valves. What insight have you had into that testing? Are you satisfied with the testing? You satisfied with the fixes? Can you please talk about any of you about that, please?
Well, we all divide up the different responsibilities. We're all aware, and different ones of us focus more in depth on the specific different hardware, software issues. And actually, that one's for Sunny.
Yeah, I've been lucky. I've been following a lot of the hardware stuff. So yeah, that is a continual stream of information that's coming from Boeing and working with our NASA engineering. So yeah, we've been following every single step of the way. It's a hard problem for them to solve, and they've been doing a great job. Actually, I was just talking to the program manager while we were at rollout this morning. They have another cycle of the valves once now that the spacecraft is at the launch pad. And that's every time they cycle the valves, they are getting a little bit more confident that their fixes in place are working. So yes, in the long run, we've been following step by step all the hardware, and then it's great to see it actually come to fruition as they'll cycle the valves one more time before we get ready to go. And it's nice weather, which is good.
Great, thank you for those answers. We have some more down here in the front of the room, if we can go to that side.
Irene Klotz with Aviation Week. Maybe for Mike, since you brought this up about the test objectives for OFT-2, just was wondering if there's anything that's been changed or tweaked since the last launch attempt in last August.
Yeah, the flight test objectives for OFT-2 have stayed pretty much the same. I think there's going to be other testing objectives and more attention
your way,
to
Salty.
our to the valves and the propulsion system. But those were never really part of the but the original flight test objectives. So we've had a chance to reevaluate a few things. On the capsule, so we have a few tweaks to the procedures for the ISS crew, but it's pretty much the same mission from the crew perspective and from the flight test perspective as we had for last August.
Public,
Thank you for that.
Not right
we have
now.
a very
I wanna
active front
do
row,
this.
so if we get this gentleman right here in the center, thank you.
Thanks. Joey Roulette with Reuters. Has NASA, or I guess this one's for Kathy, has NASA and Boeing discussed at all what would happen if, I guess from a broader test
with the
timeline
mustache,
perspective, what would happen if this mission ends again without Boeing Starliner docking to the station? And I guess another way of wording that is if, other test objectives are met, could you see Boeing flying CFT or flying humans without having demonstrated a space station docking, or is that an absolute must?
That's a great question, because we actually kind of had been struggling with this after the first attempt that we had. And we had two teams looking at what did we need to do if we didn't refly, and what did we need to do and be able to prove out if our next mission was a crewed flight test. So, we make all of our decisions with data, and so it would have to be with, what happened, what we got done, what objectives we finished, what was the issues we had, and then we'd have to do the same thing we were going to do the last time, methodically work through and lay out the options, and what could you do for us to be confident before we fly. Joey, we're not going to fly unless we feel like we've brought down the risk we need to on the ground or through other demonstrations before we fly our crews, and so we'd have to go through that same process.
Thank you, Kathy. We have one more over here in the front row.
Hi, Jeff Faust of Space News. For the astronauts, I'm just curious what your level of confidence is in the vehicle compared to, say, last August before the original OFT-2 flight, or back in 2019 at the original OFT. Knowing now the issues that have come up since then, do you feel more confident that not only those issues have been resolved, but there's less such a chance of other unknown issues coming up?
I'll just very briefly, we wouldn't be here right now if we weren't confident that this would be a successful mission. But as you mentioned, there are always unknown unknowns. That's what historically has always gotten us, right, is those things that we don't know about and we don't expect. We're ready. This spacecraft is ready. These teams are ready. Boeing is ready. ULA is ready. The mission ops folks that will control the spacecraft in space are ready, and we're excited.
Thank you. We have another question here in the center aisle of the room.
Hi, Manuel Masanti from Debate, covering the space program in Spanish. How are you? Besides, once the Starliner is docked with the station, is there any particular activity that the astronauts on board are going to be to do inside Starliner, besides transferring cargo?
So yes, one of our test objectives is to make sure that Starliner is ready for people to be inside when we're docked. So that means, for example, there's a hardline communication system and a radio communication system between Starliner and the ISS. Now, of course, Rosie will not speak very much in English or Spanish, unfortunately, but we'll bring in the ISS crew, and they'll put on a headset and also the handheld mic, and we'll do some of the communications between back and forth, so that when we get up there, we know that it will work. Or if there's any trouble, we go and fix it. So there's a lot of things with the interface with the International Space Station that the Space Station crew will help us with.
All right, thank you so much for that, Mike Fink. Do we have any other questions here in the room? Yes, here in the corner.
Hey, Irene Klotz, Aviation Week. Could someone just give us an update on if the hatch has been closed now and weather outlook for tomorrow? And when you were out at the pad today, was that your one and only chance to go up in Starliner, or is that still to come for the cruise?
There is opportunity, as Mike mentioned earlier. I will not be here. I'm actually going to be busy later, but they're going to do the comm checks. So the white room that will be maneuvered in position where they can get, and they will open the hatch. It's been closed, obviously, for the rollout. And then we'll go back inside Starliner, go through some a little bit of switch list verification, and also verify the communication system, the various ways that we can communicate. We'll test all those out, and then we'll get out and, of course, go through the standard processes of closing the hatch and doing all those things to get ready for the launch. So those things are yet to happen.
We have a date with Rosie tonight and a high five at the end.
What time is hatch closure supposed to happen?
It depends on how long the comm checks go. We have different opportunities with the TDRS satellite. So if everything goes right the first time, we should be finished with our part of the closeout around 10 or 11 p.m. But it could go longer. There's a team from Boeing, the blue team, and they're also joined with a team from United Launch Alliance, and they'll be closing the hatch, I believe, somewhere about roughly about 4 hours before the launch. So the hatch probably will stay open until tomorrow morning.
And I mean, so this is a good practice session for us. Like, we learned a lot the last time, and hatch closures and timing of hatch closures is a big part of the timeline and making sure. So this is an opportunity for the team to really refine their procedures for that too. So like Mike said, as part of our preparations for the timeline, it's about 4 hours out. You know, the weather's looking good. Bob already told us the weather's looking good. The weather just needs to hold looking good, and we're ready for 6:53 tomorrow evening.
Great.
Very exciting.
Yes, thank you so much for that. I see we have one more in the room, but first we are going to take a question on the phone line. We have Chris Davenport from the Washington Post. Chris, are you with us?
Yes, I am. Thanks. I appreciate it. For Kathy, just real quick, and I apologize because I may have misheard, but I thought you may have indicated that the crew selection for the CFT flight had not been finalized. I had thought it was clear that it was Mike Fink and Butch Wilmore. Is that not 100% finalized? Thanks.
Yeah, there's obviously a cadre. You got a cadre of potential folks here, and so I think to give Reed and the folks that are working through final selections, we're also wanting to make sure we lay out, when the final CFT planning is, so that we can work through placement. If you know that we're working our increment crews and then also getting ready for our PCM1 crew. So, we'll be looking at final CFT and PCM1 timelines this summer, like I said, and then we'll be making final crew selections for the increments coming up and CFT.
Thank you for that. We have one more over here in the room, and then we'll go to you in the center aisle.
Thanks for taking another one. Ken Kramer, Space Up Close, for Bob and probably Janet. So you're down here. I imagine you may have taken a look at SLS in the VAB. I wonder if you could give us an update on the repair work. How is it looking? When it might roll out? Give us your perspective, please.
So right now, Jim Free and his team are in the team here at KSC doing an outstanding job getting it ready to roll back out. We completed the test of the nitrogen system last night. Flow was good. We're in a good configuration to be able to complete wet dress rehearsal. Right now, we're tentatively looking to roll out early June for a wet dress towards the end of June, around the 18th or 20th. So we'll see how things work out, but they've made progress with the issues in the VAB as far as the valve on the ICPS and the leak at the tail service mast for the hydrogen. I think they're still doing a little bit of work in that area, but hopefully around June 6th timeframe, early June, we'll be rolling back out to complete wet dress.
Yeah, and I'll just add that I think the team says the work is going really, really well, that they might even be a little bit ahead of schedule, but they are methodically working through all the issues. And as Bob mentioned, the GN2 outage was complete, or the test was complete yesterday evening, and it went very, very well. So we have really, feeling really good about rolling out in early June and completing the wet dress.
Thank you.
A couple weeks later, yep.
Thank you for those answers and that question. We have another here in the center aisle.
Thanks, Joey, again with Reuters. I wanted to follow up on Chris's question, and maybe it's for Kathy or even some of the astronauts. Why not assign crews for CFT now? Or what does it kind of depend on, or what are the biggest factors that you're waiting for to make that decision?
She just said that a second ago. Okay.
Yeah. So we we had a launch attempt, as we know, with the valve issue back in late July, early August of last year, that changed things, right? So at that, it was basically just a couple of weeks after that, we had some changes in our crew assignments from what we originally had, and since that time in August, the three of us have been working as a cadre supporting Starliner. And we know that we are not necessarily assigned for CFT. And we've known that since that time frame. And we have been working the program. The powers that be could assign anyone they want. We hope they pick one of us three, or a couple of us three, to go on CFT. We've been working the program, but we've known since that time that we've been working as a cadre. And I've said that 3 times now, but this is not news to us. This is something that's a normal progression when things like this happen.
I think I just want to, when you look at how many potential crewed missions we could have.
CFT is crew flight test. Guys, what they're trying to say in plain English is that, hey, how about we make sure the spacecraft works before we assign people to it, huh? Yeah. Remember when we went to launch this a second ago and then we had crew assigned and then it didn't work? Yeah. You remember that part? Yeah, that was dumb. Let's make sure the spacecraft works before we put people on it, huh? Yeah, these people are lucky I'm not on this panel.
Next year, you realize the challenge that the crew office has about the assignments and why it's important to get the right timing and understand exactly when the crewed flight test is going to show up, because the crew office has to assign for increment missions in the spring, increment missions in the fall. We have potentially 2 vehicles that we're getting ready to go fly.
He asked that before,
in that increment mission in the fall, which includes a Starliner and a SpaceX flight. So it's just a big challenge for making sure we've got the right crews on the right vehicles and then getting in the right training flows for those different vehicles. And so, to be fair, we can't have a gap in those increment crew transportations, right? So we've got to kind of cover all the bases, including getting ready and finishing up this crewed flight test. And so we just got to go look at how the schedules lay out and then make sure we do the crew assignments based and with the vehicles, understanding what may be a primary increment crew, what may be a backup, and then how does that fit then with the training with the different vehicles. But we got to get through this demo first. It's really, really important for us to get through this demo, make sure that the vehicle is tested out, that we're not learning anything, and then take that learning into the development of the schedule and then eventually the final crew assignments.
Why is it called car seat? Why isn't it called a car chair? It's bolted down.
You're a car chair.
Yeah, okay.
Can I plug this in just so it charges?
Why here? Can't you just use a USB charger?
Because it was already plugged in here. It's not going to break anything.
Okay, yeah, sure. I'm just worried I'm going to knock it over.
Oh.
Can you imagine how Deke Slayton or Gene Kranz would answer these questions? They were actually pretty good at being cool with it, Kyron, but sometimes Sometimes they were.
I just wanted to show you I had the handbook.
Okay, cool.
I'll put it up here so you don't drop it.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry.
Hey, don't worry about it. It's fine.
I blame Wheatley.
It's Wheatley's fault.
Yeah,
It's your fault.
It is, Turtle. It's a remarkable.
Yeah, it is. Guys, the thing is that, look, if it's one thing that you don't do, you don't troubleshoot streaming setup on stream. It's a rule of mine. I want to get that worked on, but by the time I get that thing up and running, we're gonna be like 15 minutes out from Starliner. I don't want to do that.
Waiting for implementing agreement to make it through
What
on
causes
the Russian
SLS to
side,
be
and
so
then
behind
obviously got to
schedule?
get through our
Yeah.
side. So you're bringing up another piece of the puzzle that we need.
What is like the nominal plan duration for the crew flight test if it turns out you
answered
don't need
that
any of
in
these
depth
fine folks to actually
to you, Ryan,
be
2
station
times.
increment crew members?
Like 4 hours
So
ago.
really, we were going to have it be probably as like a normal test demo, which would be about 5 to 7 days. But Irene, as you know, when you're working returns, as you saw just from our private astronaut missions, that's really dependent on the weather and when we can get back safely. So, but the goal would be to have it be a short duration test mission
About an
to
hour.
be able to free up the port. So that's our goal.
Nice, Grumpy.
Thank you for that, Kathy. We have another here in the center aisle.
Yes. Ideally, would it be 2 test pilots on the first test flight, like there was for Dragon? Is that the ideal number, regardless of how long the crew would stay on board, given the uncertainties and dangers entailed in a test flight?
So, and everybody's well aware, we kind of have it covered for all contingencies, right? I mean, we did buy an extended mission in this particular case, but the goal is that is part of the equation, us looking at the duration and the complement, and then what's the right test complement for a test mission? What's the right crew complement for a test mission? So, I don't want to tie Reed's hands. I know he's an expert, the team's an expert at going and looking at the tasks that we're trying to accomplish on that particular mission, and we'll do a great job assigning the right crew to be able to accomplish that.
So would you imagine somewhere between 2 and 4 people?
Yeah, it'll be, right now we were looking at, originally there was going to be 3, obviously a minimum of 2.
Thank you for that. Do we have any more questions here in the room? All right, seeing none, that will do it for today's briefing. I want to thank all of the media for joining us here in the room and also over the phone lines.
We're talking about
a big
the next
thank you
crew
to our
mission,
panel
Tammy.
for joining us today. As a reminder, liftoff of the OFT-2 test flight is scheduled for tomorrow, May 19th at 6:54 p.m. Eastern Time. Live coverage will begin on NASA
This was filmed
TV,
yesterday,
as well as
guys. The
nasa.gov
launch is in an hour,
live
about an hour.
At 6 p.m. And today, in just about 15 minutes, there will also be a social briefing on NASA's social channels. You can go to YouTube/NASA Kennedy or Facebook/NASA Kennedy. We thank you all for joining us today, and until next time, go NASA, go Boeing, and go OFT-2.
Word. Oh, hey. Hey. ULA weather officer updates probability to go to 90%. Excellent. There's Orion. That's nice. Did you know you could follow the Artemis program on NASA TV? I don't know if you guys knew that. All right, so next thing we got up on coverage here is the coverage for OFT-2. It should start in about 5 minutes, give or take. But in the meantime, let me. This is courtesy of our buddies over at Space Scout. We are Space Scout. I don't know if they are. spacescout.info. They put together off of the press kit a mission timeline. So right now, Starliner should be, so we're pre-lift off. So we are right in here, where the last step, or the step that they're working on right now, is cabin pressurization complete, or completing cabin press systems. They're probably testing the seals in the hatch. The hatch has been closed, from what I understand here. And the next step on the timeline is poll for terminal count, which should be about 45 minutes out. But the coverage is starting here very soon. Let's go over here. There's News Desk DAS there, which is nice. Changing everything. Game over, man. Why do they fuel so early? Because they don't load quick like SpaceX, John. They trickle feed the propellants in there. And trickle feeding the propellants and keeping the vehicle stabilized is a good way to ensure that the thing is go for launch. It's so you don't run into a fueling issue. They do it slowly. And they just keep the lock system topped off until you're good to launch. But they're not using densified propellant, so they don't need to load them fast. So let me see if we can get into the KSC press room here. Let's go KSC press. KSC newsroom. So here we go. There's a live shot. You can see that the LOX vents on the first stage here, they are open, which means that that thing's fully fueled. I mean, I don't know if the huge sheet of ice that's sitting on the LOX tank gave it away. Also bugs. That's a shot of Slick 41 right there. That's at Cape Canaveral Space Force Station down in Florida. Slick 41 is the pad that the Starliner OFT-2 mission will be taking off from here momentarily. The OFT-2 mission is a second uncrewed flight test for Boeing's Starliner capsule, which is that conic structure up at the very top. That's this piece right here. Starliner is a capsule. It's a pod. It's something that people fly into. But before you fly people, you got to make sure the thing works. That would probably be a good idea. So this is an uncrewed flight test today, but the crew access arm is in position. They're basically practicing, this whole mission is basically practicing an operational mission, or testing an operational mission. So this thing is going to launch here on this Atlas V, the United Launch Alliance Atlas V. I don't know if you could tell it's ULAs by the big ULA that's on the side, but it is. They're going to launch on this Atlas V, and it's basically going to mimic a mission all the way up to the ISS. That if everything goes right here, that Starliner capsule should be up docked to the ISS by, I think by tomorrow, if I'm remembering that right. Bugs, 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 bugs. You said it was because they drip feed funding for SLS, but how would that cause it to be 5 years late? Ryan, I need you to buy me a car. Well, how much does the car cost, you ask, right? Well, a car costs $50,000, all right? And so you say, okay, you want me to buy you a car, and you think it's going to cost $50,000. Okay, I'm going to need $50,000. Well, I can really only give you about $10,000 right now. $10,000. So, the next year comes around. Well, I have $10,000 and I've started buying the tires and stuff for the car, but I still need $40,000 more to, buy the car and all the parts that I need. I'll give you $10,000 again. Okay, I'll buy the engine, I guess. Third year comes around. Hey, we told you to buy a car 2 years ago. What the heck? Well, I have 30 grand, and I have 30 grand I've basically 3/5 of a car made now. I really could use that other money like right now. Oh, no. We don't have that kind of money. Next year. Here's another 10. All right, well, I'm kind of close, I guess. Year late, but kind of close, I guess. And then the final year comes by. Okay, now we're ready. Now you have a full car. Here we go. Why did the car take so long? Well, you only gave me $10,000 at a time for a $50,000 automobile. So, math, funny how that works. It took freaking couple extra years because it took me 5 years to make the stupid thing. That's essentially what happened with SLS. Yeah. Funny.
The Eagle has landed. Rocket tranquility. We copy you on the ground.
New possibilities are opening.
The Launch America intro is Bay.
Cooperation between countries.
1-0. Liftoff. Americans return to space as Discovery clears the tower.
Discovery, go and throttle up.
Discovery, roger. Go for deploy. Everybody in the shuttle program, the crew is go for launch. Roger. Nice to be in orbit.
Interesting kit, but yeah, I'm not really interested in that right now, dude. I'm interested in this. I don't care about YouTubers boxing each other. Here we go. I'm gonna turn down the audio here for a second, just in case NASA blows your eardrums out. They like doing that.
You're looking live at a United Launch Alliance Atlas V rocket on the launch pad at Space Launch Complex 41, where we are less than an hour away from the launch of Boeing's Starliner to the International Space Station. And welcome everyone to the Kennedy Space Center here in Florida. It's a humid day.
Look,
it's a
Clark
hot
Kent.
day, around 83 degrees, but it's a wonderful day because we're launching a rocket. And we've got
Last,
coverage
please,
for
about the
you,
fueling.
live coverage of Boeing's
no, I'm good.
Starliner Orbital Flight Test 2. I'm Daryl Nail with NASA.
And I'm Dee Russell with Boeing Communications. Boeing crews worked throughout the day getting Starliner ready from Launch Complex 41, which is just a few miles away from us at the Cape Canaveral Space Force Station. The instantaneous launch window is scheduled for 6:54 p.m. Eastern Time.
This is an uncrewed mission that will test the Starliner spacecraft and Atlas V rocket, beginning with launch,
That's
then going to
Superman.
docking and
That ain't Daryl
undocking,
Nail.
and then, of course, a return
It's Clark
to Earth.
Kent. His name's Clark,
This
isn't
test flight will provide valuable data toward
It'll
NASA
work, Kevin.
certifying Starliner for regular flights with astronauts to and from the space station.
Yeah, and the NASA astronauts are really looking forward to that. We're going to talk to them a little bit later on in the show. But let's take you back to yesterday morning. What
When
a
you make a
beautiful
funny
shot
joke,
this is.
Jackal.
Look at that. This is the rollout of the rocket to the pad. 2 rail cars pulling the 3.5 million pound
Stay safe,
convoy to the mobile launch platform, along with the rocket and Starliner spacecraft, from the
No,
vertical
Shadow, no,
integration
you're not.
facility out to the launch pad. What a journey. It takes about 20 minutes to travel that 1/3 of a mile. The Atlas V rocket there, what a great shot.
It's
Standing
like 41,
172
Bill.
feet tall, or about 52 meters, and it weighs about 979,000 pounds, or 444,000 kilograms, fully fueled. That's a heavy rocket. Fast forward to today, and you can see there from the live shot, in preparation for launch, both stages of the Atlas V rocket were fueled up with propellant, and that happened just a few hours ago. And as you can see from some of our views provided from our
I
launch
wish you-
cameras, it is a beautiful day out. We've
cameras
got a
suck,
low
Ian.
cloud deck in the area, some clouds that have developed. We'll talk
I
to our
don't know
weather
off the top
officer
of my
about
head,
that
Hippo.
in just a bit.
And earlier today, another important pre-launch milestone was completed.
There we go.
Boeing's ground crews inside the White Room closed the
Wish
hatch
we,
to the
you know,
Starliner.
saw this live.
Although there's
That would be
no
cool.
crew flying on this second test flight, the Boeing closeout crew is working as if there is.
Oh, that's
Now
really
let's
cool.
check in
That's
with
really
Launch Weather
freaking
Officer
cool,
Brian
man.
Sizik with the 45th Space
Oh,
Wing.
that's cool.
Yeah, Brian, we've got
That's a
some
spaceship.
clouds that moved in over the area. Earlier today, the clouds were not there. We had clear skies, and it was looking good. But then we started to see some cloud cover, and I can see in the background there that you're tracking that.
Yes, Dale, you're right. And actually, those high clouds that moved in, you're seeing that filtered
This guy's
sunshine
cool.
behind you
Watch.
right now. Those actually really help for our launch conditions today. And let me explain that a little bit. So we have this high upper level cloud deck, cirrostratus clouds that are moving into the area. And that actually limited the amount of surface heating that we got throughout the day. And that's how the atmosphere heats up. It's almost like a boiler plate from the bottom. So the surface heats, and that helps bubble up some of those showers and thunderstorms that we see so often here in Florida in the summertime. But as I mentioned, those clouds really help to limit that heating, so we saw a lot less shower and thunderstorm coverage than we would have otherwise seen throughout today. And if you look a little bit farther south, you can
this
see
guy.
where there was less of those upper level clouds, we actually had more of those showers and thunderstorms developing. So really overall, that is what's leading to some very good launch conditions today. My colleague Will Ulrich just briefed at the T-minus 1 hour weather brief that the probability of go is now 90%. So let's take a look at that launch forecast. A 90%
Cape
chance of
Canaveral
go. The
Space Force
current weather
Station,
status
Arsenal. I'll talk
is
to you a little
go,
bit about it in a
and a
second.
90%
chance that we remain go throughout the count and into T0. So overall conditions are looking really good. All the weather rules
Brian
we look
Sizek
at
is cool,
are both
Ian.
for
He's
natural
cool.
and trigger lighting, and everything is looking good as we head closer to T0. Guys.
Yeah.
All right, that's a great update, Brian.
See, the funny thing is that Ian, is that Brian actually has to be right with his job. He can't really afford to be wrong. You know why? Because then you lose something expensive. So unlike other weathermen, you know, insert your local weatherman here who gets it wrong. He can't get it wrong. He has to get that right, or else it's gonna not be good. Oh man, that was a joke. Okay, meteorology is cool.
Launch Alliance. In fact,
No pressure.
recently,
No pressure.
oversaw the GOES T launch. Well done. And Boeing's Lauren Seabrook, the newest member of Boeing's broadcast team. Welcome to you both.
Of course.
Hey, thank you so much, Daryl. Dylan and I are coming to you from the heart of ULA's operations, where we are really just tucked in the middle of everything going on. We are surrounded on all sides by the men and women, the engineers who are prepping the rocket. And actually, if we take a look behind us, you can see us up here kind of above all the action that's happening down below, and you can see what's happening on the sides here as well, just to give you a better perspective on where we're able to listen to the flight loops. So Dylan, why don't you give us an update on how things are going with the rocket?
Well, Lauren, Atlas V and Centaur are fueled and ready to go. The vehicle was rolled out to the pad yesterday, where it was connected to the propellant storage farms, air conditioning, all the other pad utilities. Daryl talked about that just a minute ago. The countdown started this morning about 7:30. We powered up the rocket, began our final checks of all of our avionics systems, and then started final preparations out at Launch Complex 41. All that work wrapped up around noon, and with Complex 41 and the launch vehicle ready, we started cryogenic tanking just before 1 p.m. Cryogenic tanking takes under 2 hours to complete and went very, very smoothly today. For now, the vehicle remains in stable topping, and all of our pre-launch checks are basically complete. The team is active closing out the crew access tower as we speak. Once all that work is wrapped up, the team will clear the pad. This is the 93rd flight of the safe and reliable Atlas V launch vehicle, the second flight of the N22 configuration, the 103rd launch from Slick 41, and ULA's 150th launch overall. This vehicle is equipped with a dual-engine Centaur, a configuration that is uniquely capable of providing all the performance required for Starliner's mission.
So let's take a look at some video that we recorded just about an hour ago from our white room. This is when our pad team was wrapping up pre-launch procedures. Like I said, it wrapped up about an hour ago, but some of the things you'll see on your screen have been happening throughout the afternoon. They've been doing things like making sure the switches inside the spacecraft were all in the proper position. They removed ground support equipment that was no longer needed for Starliner, and they've ensured that all the air ducts were not blocked. They also armed the launch abort system switch inside the spacecraft. That's actually something the crew will do in the future, but because of course we have no crew on board today, the pad team took care of that for us. They also checked to see if the gravity indicator was secure. I can tell you, I can confirm the gravity indicator is tethered to seat number 2. And before the hatch closure, they purged the cabin to make sure that the humidity was at the right level. Once the hatch was closed, they checked for leaks by pressurizing it, and they basically do this by pushing air into the cabin and holding that pressure for about 10 minutes. It's kind of like inflating a balloon. If you think about if you were, pushing air into the balloon and holding it, if there were any holes in that balloon, you would notice it would start to leak, and that would be very obvious. Well, the telemetry that feeds back to us can let us know if there are any leaks, and that way we know that we are safe to fly. And so once they checked the integrity of the hatch seal, they released that air, and then they normalized the pressure. And everything so far has gone really smoothly. The entire pad team is actually called the Blue Team. It's made up of 5 people from Boeing and 3 people from ULA. And Dylan, they really work together, but they have a lot of different responsibilities. What are some of the things the ULA pad team members do?
Well, the ULA team members are there to really manage the crew access tower system. So they're performing safety checks of the tower and configuring the white room prior to the team leaving the pad. Part of that configuration of the white room will be retracting the Starliner access plank and raising the white room environmental seal for launch. Once all that work is done, the Blue Team will clear the pad and head for the fallback area for launch.
And we also watched a really special moment of the team coming together right at the end of finishing their closeout procedures. They were arm in arm.
Well, I'll tell you, you know, if you think the rocket looks a little sus, it is venting. I mean, I'm just saying. It's venting. If you think it's sus. Don't look at me like that. It is. Look. See the oxygen vent? It is venting. Boom. Roasted. It's actually venting twice. One for the first stage and one for the second stage. That's right. That's right. Alex, I said don't stare at me like that. Don't do that again. Here, let them explain it.
Ascent begins at T-minus 0, liftoff, the end of the countdown, and the beginning of the mission. Shortly afterwards, at T plus 12 seconds, the rocket rolls, lining up Starliner with its target orbit and putting the astronauts in a heads-up position.
No, never.
Then, around T plus 40 seconds, max Q starts. That's also known as max aerodynamic pressure. This is a critical time when the atmospheric forces reach their highest.
KSP2 graphics do be looking good, though.
At about plus 1 minute 35 seconds, the two solid rocket boosters run out of fuel and burn out, and about a minute later they separate from the booster. The Atlas booster engine continues to burn for almost 2 more minutes. Then at approximately plus 4:30, booster engine cutoff, or BECO. About 5 seconds later, the booster separates, and so does the ascent cover on top of Starliner.
So the
At
launch
around
escape
4
system
minutes
has somewhere to
45
go,
seconds,
right?
the Centaur upper stage ignites, continuing the push to orbital speeds. Then a little after 5 minutes, Starliner is free of the atmosphere and doesn't need additional aerodynamic support,
Booster engine
and
cut
the
off.
aeroskirt is jettisoned. After a long 6+ minute push from Centaur, main engine cutoff, or MECO, happens around 12 minutes after liftoff.
So look, Ryan,
Then,
see right there?
when Centaur successfully separates almost 15 minutes after launch, ULA's job is done. But Starliner is not quite in orbit yet. After a 16-minute coast, Starliner ignites 4 of its orbital maneuvering and attitude control,
Thank
or
you,
OMAC
OMAC.
engines for the orbital insertion burn, and then 31 minutes after liftoff, the ascent profile is complete.
Bilko, I'm doing great, man. Paper City, how you doing? All right. I actually saw a couple of good questions there. So, what a waste of the first stage. It's all right. Hey, ULA guys, you can dump on ULA all you want if you really, if you really freaking want to. But I'll be 100% real with you. They ULA with their next generation rocket that's replacing Atlas V is pursuing reusability. Yeah, they're going to reuse those first stages, or at least part of them. They're going to reuse the engines, which is, that's pretty neat. That's pretty neat. Let me just get footage up here. All right.
In controlling.
Cool. All right. Yeah. So what other questions did you guys have? Let me pop through while this is up. So the aero cover. T-Man, there's no RP1 vent. You don't vent cryogenic propellants or non-cryogenic propellants. That's not good. That's probably not a good idea. Why is the adapter on the bottom of Starliner open on the bottom? So that's the aero skirt. Okay, and then carrying the SRBs around. All right, we'll back off a little bit here. All right, so I always say the right questions to ask if you're asking yourself questions about rockets, guys, is to ask not why did they do that, but what are you trying to do? We all know that toting around some dead weight like flamed out SRBs is not a good thing, obviously. That's just exactly as it is, dead weight. Actually, it's mass because we're flying, but it's a rocket, right? So that's just, you'd think that that's bad for it, right? So, okay, why would they carry them then? Because it's not that they're worried about carrying dead weight. It's not that, so what else could it be? Think about it. What do you think? Balance? Well, the rockets are more or less symmetrical, Weed. It's not about balance. If it was about balance, they would be worried about non-simultaneous jettison, which Atlas does do in certain configurations. So, some of you already answered it, but in case you guys don't know, it's aero loads. So the front of these boosters have a nose cone that's actually kind of curved in, if you look at them. See, they're curved in. These boosters right here have a curved in nose. So what's that going to do when you go to jettison if you jettison these boosters when the air pressure is still high? That nose cone tilting in like that is actually going to jettison the back of the booster, and then the boosters will actually come back in and they'll tip the rocket because of the curved surface. It's forcing the air away at high pressure, and that would make the rockets fall in on each other. You don't want anything hitting anything once it's separated. That's not a good idea. You see how that nose cone is curved in? Because it's curved in, you have to wait until your ambient pressure goes down enough to where those things won't create enough. They won't create as much drag, and your jettison system can push them away from the vehicle. So Atlas V takes a little bit of a penalty here, but you don't have to worry about the SRMs hitting that core stage, the Atlas Common Core booster. You don't have to worry about it hitting that on the way up. That's why they wait an extra second. Now, the next question, the aero skirt right there. Well, engineers, I'll tell you, engineers are not good at dealing with customers. So, a lot of the times with names on vehicles, there's no deeper meaning. The aero skirt, what is it? Well, it's a skirt-shaped thing on the back of Starliner that has to do with aerodynamics. Engineers are not good at dealing with customers. I have people skills. I am good at dealing with people, so I can translate that for you if you want. What's the black ring around the trunk? Aero skirt. That's a cover for the aero skirt. Now, first and foremost, guys, Starliner has an integrated launch escape system, or an ILES. It's in its service module, which is this thing with the ridges on the sides, right? The escape motor engines are actually on the very back of Starliner. But if there is a launch escape and they have to and this capsule has to get away from the booster for whatever reason, those motors are going to need to fire. The motors are actually inside of this ring, so when they do fire, the exhaust will go out here. These are blowout panels. They'll pop out, and the Starliner will be able to get away if, God forbid, anything went wrong. So that's the first reason. The second reason is what the name implies, an aero skirt. Now, okay, this is when this gets a little bit weird, okay? Does Starliner have the ability to board any person of the ascent? NASA would not let it fly, Jazos, if it didn't. Black ring around the service module, my bad. Oh, that's for stability in the event of a launch escape, to keep the center of pressure backwards so the capsule doesn't flip end over end. Why? Because you're toting that service module with it. It's the same exact reason why Dragon 2, Starliner's, SpaceX counterpart, has those fins on the service module. It's for stabilization to keep the center of pressure low so the capsule doesn't flip over when you go to do a launch escape. That's why legacy launch escape systems like on the Apollo CSM or Mercury, right, have a puller motor to keep the thing nice and stable. You pull the thing away, and then the capsule flips over because capsules always want to fly heat shield first. In Starliner's case, the heat shield is basically right here. It's inside of this little cavity right there. Now, what happens if the thermal curtain fails? Wrong launch vehicle. So, the aero skirt. Fellas, okay, so this gets a little bit complicated. The short answer is for better aerodynamic stability. So, okay, break down that word, aerodynamic. Has to do with flying through the air in changing conditions. So, would you think that this rocket from T-0 to all the way up into the air, do you think the aerodynamic conditions are going to change between here and up there? Yes. They very much will. Now, that's not necessarily the reason why the aero skirt is there, but long story short, at certain points during the flight regime, during the dynamic ascent, because, air pressure is at 1 bar down there and down here, and it's at 0 bar up there. You're aerodynamic. Funny, I know. Like I said, engineers are not good at dealing with customers. Okay. Now, the name, it's exactly as it's implied, because engineers don't have time for funny speak. You know what I mean? So this is where this gets complicated. So it has to do with aero, because and it has to do with dynamic conditions. At certain points during Atlas V's ascent regime, Starliner, because it's capsule shaped, is a cone, and cones are pretty aerodynamic, and it will have the aero shell on the front to cover up the nose cone. But anything that flies through a fluid body, so water, air, solid to an extent, I guess, mostly water and air, leaves a wake. this thing ends up going so ridiculously fast that it compresses air off of the conic structure here, and it leaves a wake. It's very similar to how it's similar visually, not dynamically, to a boat going through the water. It leaves a wake, but the wake, because we're up in the air, is in 3 dimensions as opposed to a boat going over a 2D plane of water, right? Well, not 2-dimensional, but you get the idea. So it leaves a wake. Right? Now, is the wake the problem? No, because the wake is going out here somewhere. The wake angle actually depends on the speed of the vehicle, but on top of that, it depends on the atmospheric pressure as well. It's almost aerodynamics. Remember, changing aero conditions. So is that the problem? Well, kind of. Yes, no. So the aero skirt is there because of the aerodynamic forces that induce vibration on the vehicle. So what? So long story short, this aero wake right here leaves a shockwave, like a sonic boom, for instance. That's a good example of you getting that wake right in the face if you've ever seen a plane fly faster than Mach 1 at an air show, or if you've ever seen a Falcon 9 coming back down, you know exactly what I'm talking about. That ba-ba-ba! Or if you date... I'm going to date myself. If you ever hear a shuttle coming back, it's a really distinct boom. That's the wake. That's what you're kind of hearing. You're hearing that wake, right? Now, don't get me wrong. That wake isn't there all the time, and not all the time it makes a sound. That's what the speed of sound exists. But that's another... Transonic flight regimes are another story. Long story short, sound reverberates off of that wake that this vehicle makes, and it reverberates back onto the stack. It basically bounces off that wake and comes back and collapses in on the rocket. That aero skirt is there to protect against that, to make sure you don't damage anything. That's why it's there. So short story, aerodynamics. Long story, aerodynamic wake reverberations bouncing off the wake back onto the vehicle at certain points during the flight regime. That's the reason. It's there for stability. But it's not the aerodynamic stability that you might think. It's vibrations from aerodynamic stability at certain points because of the wake. It's bouncing off the wake. Yeah, weird, right? Yeah, it's very strange. But that's the reason why that's there. Just had a call on the loop about a hydrazine bottle. Team moving to anomaly net. Wow.
Later we'll be able to give those back to 14 historically black colleges and universities.
Yeah, anything that flies through the air, guys, yeah, it leaves a wake. Just like anything that floats through water leaves a wake. Now, don't get me wrong. One is hydrodynamics and one is aerodynamics. Well, what's the difference? Well, one's a liquid and one's a gas. That's a pretty big difference. Is that a difference enough for you? Vibrations just add more struts. Well, David, you should see how many struts they have holding Centaur to the Starliner, dude. There's like 30 of them in there.
Team is now clearing the tower and clearing the pad, and final preparations for launch are underway as we prepare the vehicle's propulsion and hydraulic systems for flight.
Kind of, T-Man.
The
It's all
launch
dynamics.
Team will be,
No, it isn't. Yes, it is.
Data,
No, it isn't.
Loading that into our flight
Yes, it
computer
is.
that helps Atlas, Centaur, and Starliner kind of steer its way through the winds as we move through the atmosphere.
No, it isn't.
Also,
What's that,
we'll hear very shortly comm checks between the Launch Control Center, Mission Control in Houston, the BMCC at Kennedy Space Center, and then for crewed missions, the astronauts will participate in that comm check as well. Once all that
Just
work
use
is done,
struts.
the crew access arm will be retracted, and then the team will start the final polling for launch.
And as you mentioned,
Oh, yeah,
there
cooking.
are a lot of things that our crew...
The docking system that they spoke about, is it new? Well, yes and no. This is the same exact docking port as Starliner, all previous Starliners that have flown with a docking port. So OFT-1 and the pad abort test. It's the same docking port, and their docking port is based off of the International Docking System Standard, or IDSS for short. It's the same docking port that Dragon has. Honestly, it's the same thing. It's docking to the same part of the space station. Dragon and Starliner both have a very similar docking port. Now, why? Now, I know what people are going to ask. Well, if they have the same docking port, doesn't having two capsules that have the same docking port kind of mean that they don't need to... Like, why do you need two capsules if they're using one docking port? Don't you think that using two different docking ports would be better? Well, no. Long story short, the IDSS is based off of the APAS module, which NASA has tons of experience with because that's the shuttle's docking port. It's based off of APAS, which believe it or not, is a Russian design. Androgynous Peripheral Attachment System. Good trivia question, good bar trivia, if you will, is that the shuttle flew its entire career, and every space station it docked to, it used a Russian docking port. Yeah, didn't think of that one, huh? It's kind of weird, right? So the docking port is more or less the same, but this docking port, the difference between the OFT-1 and the OFT-2 mission is that this docking port has a aero cover on top of it. There's an aero hatch, similar to Dragon's nose cone. It's kind of the same. Yeah, they're both fluid. Yeah, of course, Mike. Yeah. Yeah, this one has a cover on top. Other than that, cooking fat, it's more or less the same thing. Now, why would they all use one docking port? It's because NASA go with what you know. That's what works in spaceflight. The less new things that you need to learn when you're doing spaceflight, the better. That's why you often see vehicles that have components that are derived from other vehicles, like SLS with shuttle motors, for instance. Or if you look at these pictures of Starliner, it has shuttle-derived thermal tiles on it and shuttle-derived thermal protection system. There's Nomex. There's Nomex fire blankets on Starliner. That's what that grated cloth thing looks like on the outside. It's for thermal protection, and it's shuttle-derived. The reason why it's shuttle-derived is because, like I said, you go with what you know. You don't want to learn anything new when you fly. That's the ideal scenario. If you're learning something new, that's a really nice way of saying something went wrong. Because spaceflight, and this is, if you're new, first of all, thank you for watching. I appreciate it. If you're new, the key to the whole thing is understanding what the frick you just made. You have to understand what you made, and you have to understand how it works. Now, I know people are like, what? But I can think of several times in engineering throughout history where people have made something and then they figured out something new about how it works a little bit later, and they're like, oh, wow, I didn't realize it could do that. Yeah, that's not, don't do that. You can do that in Kerbal Space Program, but don't do that they don't do that with real life. You really want to try to understand exactly what you made, and you don't want to learn anything new during flight. Now, with that being said, there are things called unknown unknowns. Can you predict for every scenario? Nope. No way. These capsules have hundreds of thousands of moving parts. There's no way you can predict every single scenario. I'll give you a good example. Apollo 13, 1970. Apollo 13 they go to stir the O2 tank, and the O2 tank explodes and blows a hole in the side of the spacecraft. Yeah, that's an unknown unknown. What NASA later figured out is, turns out when the guy that was installing that O2 tank, when he drops it on the floor and it breaks stuff, particularly causing a wire to become unsheathed inside of the tank, so when you went to activate the stirring function, you had an electrical short inside of an O2 tank. Yeah, that tends to be a little bit of a problem, especially if the guy doesn't tell anybody. That's an unknown unknown. Apollo 13 is an unknown unknown. You generally don't want that to happen. That's not good. That's not a good thing. Now, don't get me wrong. For people that know spaceflight, that was a very condensed version. Long story short, some idiot dropped the tank before he put it in. Yeah, that's a problem. That's not good. That's a processing flow problem for the spaceflight people. If you understand that means that you didn't Q&A it good enough. You didn't beta test it enough. You don't want to learn new things when you're flying, right? So. Ecom, try SCE to auxiliary. Well, that was known behavior. That's why Apollo 12 worked. SCE to aux. Yeah, that's good. That's good control. Kyron gifted a sub to Cantab. All right, anyway. Let's pop back over here. Whoop.
Away from their consoles.
All right,
hey, guys,
Mike
thank you
Barry
both
here
for taking the time. Butch and Mike, you guys were some of the last people to see
That's
and
right,
look
Kyron.
inside that spacecraft today. Mike, we have a shot of you actually doing some work. Tell us a little bit about what you did and what you saw and how you're feeling.
Yes, Starliner looks great. Myself and our other astronaut, Sonny Williams, who, along with the Boeing team, who stayed up late last night getting the capsule ready. We performed comm checks back and forth to the Mission Control Center in Houston, to the Boeing Mission Control Center here in Florida at KSC. We did it all through the TDRS, which is a tracking and data relay satellite that we use for communication. So everything looked really good. We set up the switches. Rosie doesn't move so much, so we set them up for her, and we made sure the cockpit was ready for launch.
Yeah, and I didn't go because Rosie took my spot.
Well,
Rosie
she is
is the,
anthropomorphic, not animatronic, right? So
We did give her a high five on the way out.
You did.
That's the
we wish her all the
instrumentation
best.
dummy.
She's
that's
going to
in
get
the,
some great data for us too,
the
especially
capsule.
for the launch loads and the landing loads, so that we know that it's going to be great for humans to go fly.
We have a question for Mike Fink now. Why does NASA need 2 commercial crew providers?
We can't keep all of our eggs in one basket, and I think some of the words that we've been saying in the past couple of days is dissimilar redundancy. In other words, we have another way to go up besides the SpaceX and the Crew Dragon, and it's dissimilar. So we're not using the same rocket or the same capsule. So if there's something wrong with one, we can still have a chance to continue our continuous human presence aboard the International Space Station, and it allows NASA to not worry about the launches and landings for space station flights, so we can focus on going to the moon and beyond.
Gotcha,
Butch, how does an uncrewed test flight, which is autopilot, as you know, prepare you for your flight test, where you're going to be doing some of the manual flying of Starliner?
Yeah, I tell you, it is uncrewed, and we are very jealous about that, but because this is human spaceflight after all, right? But this is a normal progression.
I don't know the answer to that hit, but I think so.
Right? This is experimental developmental spaceflight test. And as you go through, we're testing on the ground, as you know, all the different various systems. We're in the simulator testing software, hardware, and of course this is, like I said, the normal progression. So we'll go through the processes to go all the way to launch, rendezvous and dock, undock, fly around, return to Earth, and enter descent and landing and all of that. And we learn an immense amount through all of those processes that are beneficial as we go forward, because like you said, we do have also flight test objectives to certify the spacecraft that we'll be doing when we have the crewed mission, which will be next, hopefully 6 months or so. So we'll get there eventually, but we have to get this one done first to make sure that we are in line for that crewed mission.
Mike,
got the
how
right
does a
southern
mission
draw,
to low
Jake,
Earth
doesn't he?
orbit help with missions to deep space?
Yes, so I was really lucky. When I came here in 1996, we didn't have a space station yet, and with the International Space Station, we've learned how to live in orbit. We've been able to work on some technologies such as our life support systems and other things, and how to keep humans living in space for long periods of time. And then that'll help us when we go to the moon and Mars and other places, because we know how to live in space, not just visit like we did in the early parts of the program. So it's a natural progression.
Jim.
All right, very good. And you know what? You guys were both out there at the pad, and we have proof of it. We're going to throw up a picture. There you guys are in front of the rocket. That's a nice shot.
I think, Butch, you're a little taller.
Yeah, a little taller.
Hey, we want to thank you both for being with us. Really appreciate your time. We'll let you get back on console.
Outstanding. Thank you.
Thank you. Go Starliner.
All right, the 45th Space Wing just wrapped up a weather briefing with the launch team. Let's bring back in Weather Officer Brian Cizik to talk about what was discussed. Brian, Will Ulrich gave that briefing, your fellow launch weather officer.
Like that one, Franklin?
Any updates there?
Yes, he did. Weather continues to look really good. As you mentioned, we just heard that brief from my colleague Will Ulrich, the lead launch weather officer on this mission, and weather continues to look very favorable as we head closer and closer to T0. So here's a little bit of a different look. Earlier we looked at satellite. Now let's take a live look at the radar. There's complex 41 and a 10 nautical mile ring around the pad that we're concerned about in terms of weather. And the one feature that you'll notice here, this squiggly line, that's actually the leading edge of the sea breeze pushing in, and that can often be a trigger for showers and thunderstorms in the summertime and late spring, as we're in right now. But notice really nothing going on across central Florida, and that's all thanks to those high upper level cirrus clouds really limiting the stability in the atmosphere. So we remain go for weather, and a 90% probability of remaining go as we head into T0. Guys, back to you.
Fantastic update. Thank you very much. Brian Cizik, launch weather officer with the 45th Space Wing. Now we're getting down to money time.
I know. The
Money
launch conductor
time.
is also talking to his team, and we want to carry that moment live for you.
Money time.
So let's go back over to Lauren and Dylan at the Atlas Spaceflight Operations Center.
Yeah, Dee, we are waiting to hear the spacecraft
Go
poll
ahead.
as well as the launch
Yes, sir, we
vehicle poll,
verified.
which will be coming up here shortly. But in the meantime, I want to tell you about some of the preps that have been going on, team over.
I'm trying to hear the
cycling
comm
through
move.
Starliner's isolation valves every few days since it was fueled up about 20 days ago, and that has continued while the spacecraft has been out of the launch complex. Just a few hours ago, they also cycled through one last time, meaning they made sure each
we're
valve
showing the same
opened and closed with no problem, and everything went well, and
20
they're
minutes
ready
out,
to
guys.
fly. And they also just a few minutes ago were able to open the valves, and those will remain open through launch. So we are good to go on all of that. Our teams have worked as well on the mission elapsed timer since OFT-1 to ensure that it operates nominally today and during future flights. And before we came on the air, the spacecraft and launch vehicle were synchronized with the mission elapsed time at L-3 hours. That will be done.
The reason why they're talking about syncing up the timers, guys, is because this is the OFT-2 mission. On the OFT-1 mission, the timer on the capsule and the timer on the rocket were not synced up. That's why they're like, yep, nope, we did that this time. Yep, nope. They're really making sure that all the T's are crossed and all the I's are dotted because, yeah, that the capsule thought it was in space when it was still on the ground. They didn't sync the clock between Atlas and Starliner. Yeah, I know. Now, keep in mind, I know what people are going to say. Really? You overlooked that detail? Dude, I will tell you, when you are dealing with something that has this many moving parts, that's designed to fly this far into space, this fast, and there's thousands of people involved, you'd be surprised how easy it is to lose track of a small detail like that. You don't want to Michael Bolton it. But also, I always mess up some mundane detail. No, but you got to remember that that's why they're doing these test missions. You know how much that would have sucked if there were people on board when that happened? That would have really been bad. So, you learn and you test again. And that's what they're doing now. That's why they're talking about syncing that clock up. So, 18 minutes. Coming up on 18 minutes, we should be here for terminal count.
Click on launch ops. This time we'll conduct our CST-100 poll for terminal count. Report readiness to support terminal count
see
when
all those
prompted.
monitors?
MSR manager. MSR is ready. STC.
ECT is ready.
I'm talking about fractions of a penny.
Let it go. CST-100 is proceeding with final configuration for launch. All operators monitor LCCs and report any LCC violations to your operations leads.
Launch Control Center.
SMD, SLIC, launch ops.
SMD.
CST-100 is ready for terminal count. The management poll for launch will be conducted on ULA Channel 3 at L-8 minutes.
SMD copies.
All right, sounds good. We are good for that. So, Dylan.
So they basically said they're ready to go around the horn and make sure that all the people that control all the different systems on the rocket are ready to go. LCC violations, as he was talking about, basically, you know, if they're talking to like the SRB guy and he's like, the SRBs aren't ready, they'll hold the count. So keep an eye on this number. This number shouldn't stop. If it stops, that means they're working something. There's an unknown that was found. But just because there's an unknown doesn't necessarily mean that the mission isn't going to go. It depends on the severity of the issue. It really depends on what you're doing. Now, once again, SMD, CST-100, and the Launch Control Center have all reported no problems right now. So that's good. The next step on the mission timeline here is Starliner to internal power. Internal power happens at T-minus 15. What does that mean? What's that? Well, the capsule right now is plugged into the grid. They unplug it and make sure, they unplug it before they go to launch it to make sure that all the batteries on the thing are working correctly. Because you can't attach a cable to the side and launch it up into space. That doesn't work very well. Yeah, I know. Fun fact. So we should be coming up on the handover to internal power here in a moment, but right now, the CST-100 Control Center, Launch Control Center, the SMD Control Center are all reporting good for launch. That's a good thing.
Systems. We want everything on Starliner working before we go fly today.
And launch.
And right now everything seems to be working, so we're in a good countdown right now.
That's right. There are just a few more milestones to get through before launch. One coming up in the next minute or so.
There shouldn't be any more scheduled
switching
holds.
of Starliner from external to internal.
Technically, Smuck, right now they're in a planned 4-minute hold. They will resume the count when the master L time reaches 4 minutes. But yeah, this is that one is Starliner. Oh, Starliner's flight control room. Oh, they're using a flight. Oh, that's cool. I didn't realize that. So, okay, why did I just geek out there for a second? So, it looks like Boeing is at Johnson Space Center. So, Mission Control Houston. Houston, we have they're using those. They're using those rooms. Those are mission operations rooms. So that's actually really freaking cool. Yeah, that's awesome. What's the difference? One's a T and one's an L.
Space station. So with that in mind, how does it feel to be here today
So
as
that's
NASA
NASA's
works
Deputy
to certify
Administrator,
a second provider, meaning
Pam
more
Melroy.
trips,
She's
hopefully
second
to
in
the
command at
International
NASA.
Space
She's
Station.
cool.
Oh, this
Flew
is
the
a
shuttle
great
a bunch of
moment.
times.
When we built the space station, we were really focused on all the amazing science
I
that
know,
we could
Tech.
do and the
That's
innovation.
cool.
And so now having another way to get there just gives us more resilience. It allows us to do even more science. And I think as a
Do
former
all the science,
shuttle
Pam.
astronaut,
All of it.
at a time when there were only 2 human spacecraft
Nice.
that were available in the entire world,
Yeah.
and now we have more, and that means more people can go to space. And the innovation that happens at the space station is just so exciting to think about.
Yeah, I love how you light up when you talk about this because tell me, I mean, it's so important to sustain this.
Okay, right
permanent
now you
presence
should
in
have
space, right?
Starliner 2
It's
internal
incredibly
power.
important. We hope to
Countdown
go
net
out
is
into the solar
over the
system with
AG1.
humans to do science and to explore. And those are really long trips. So
Oh, yes.
we really need to
Thanks, buddy.
understand how to live and operate in space. The International Space Station is providing critical technologies that we are testing to go onto the moon and out to Mars and even beyond. But in addition to that, what we've really found is that having a lab allows us to have more innovation.
Yeah.
So the shuttle only flew 5, 6, 7 times a year for about 10 days to 2 weeks at a time. Now we have more payloads, more experiments. We have commercial
Нет,
research
Julia.
going on the station. So that permanent
Bolshoi.
presence allows us to make so much more progress.
Bolshoi
As a
ракета
former
носит L.
astronaut, as a former test pilot before that, can you give us some insight into how our NASA astronauts must be feeling today as they watch this unfold?
Atlas is pretty big.
Well, for test pilots, in God we trust, everyone else brings data. So what you see as a test pilot is the fascination with, okay, how's everything going to work? What we have learned through many years in the aviation side is that the engineers do their best, but there's
45
always
meter.
things that happen that you don't expect. And so really that's what the crew is looking for. They're looking for what worked, what we need
Hydrolox
to
second
continue
stage,
to work
Hinks.
on.
Carolox
That
first
is actually
stage
the
with
meaning
2
of a test
booster
flight.
SRBs attached
So
to the
it's
side.
as a tester, it's actually a great moment to see it come together.
Yeah, to get that opportunity.
Yes.
Perfect. Janet, thank you so much.
That's actually a really good question, Boo. I understand having 2 providers for human flight, but for the ISS. But what's the point of innovation for the ISS when it's going to deorbit soon? Well, Boo, the idea is that NASA, after the ISS goes away, is that they want to focus on doing stuff out at the moon. So what they're going to do right now, they're paying Boeing and SpaceX to launch people into space. Well, guess what? When the ISS goes, they're going to pay other customers, other commercial providers to operate space stations in space. One of them that's already kind of ready to go and on the books is Axiom. If you're familiar with SpaceX, Axiom 1. They paid SpaceX to launch people up to the space station because Axiom is going to actually add modules to the ISS, and then they're going to separate when the ISS goes away, and then they're going to have the first commercial low Earth orbit space station. Yeah, Axiom. In the meantime, NASA has a follow-up program to the Axiom programs called Commercial Low Earth Orbit Destinations, or CLEOD for short. CLEOD is basically a bunch. NASA's going to not just pay to launch people into space to low Earth orbit, but they're also going to pay people to operate different space stations for science. Commercial keeps the costs down, and they have 4 different space stations to do 4 times the science, and that opens up the door for space tourism and stuff. So basically, think about it like this. It's you're at the top of a mountain and it's snowing. There's CAA retract, so we are at T-minus 11 minutes here. CAA retract is looking good. So the idea is that NASA has a snowball of space economy at the top of a snowy mountain. They kick the snowball down the mountain and it turns into an avalanche. That opens up the door to make space more affordable and more accessible. So you could start seeing more tourist missions in space, and that grows the space economy. You start seeing more science being done. That opens up the door to space stations that could, like potentially space stations that could build spaceships in space, like on-orbit manufacturing. There are several companies in the aerospace industry in the U.S. that are working on this right now. Firefly is working on building like a standardized rocket motor and standardized plumbing for rockets and standardized tanks for rockets. And there's another company called Relativity Space that's looking at they're doing right now 3D printing an entire rocket, an entire vehicle. And the idea is that they're going to 3D print. The idea is that someday you can work on 3D printing stuff up in space, so you don't need to bring up a complicated thing up into space. You literally just bring up a gigantic spool of space PLA for you 3D printing people. No, they use laser sinter aluminum manufacturing, stuff like that. So the idea is to start to commercialize low Earth orbit, so we can actually go, instead of seeing like maybe one launch every couple of months of people up into space. The idea is that you could see a lot of launches over time, and then maybe someday flying into low Earth orbit is just you could take a vacation to a space station or something. That's the idea. That's the plan. And then in the meantime, while they're doing that, NASA will focus on going to the moon, and they're going to do moon-based stuff at the latter part of this decade and into the 2030s. And then the idea from there is that you do the same thing with the moon. In the middle of the 2030s, they might start commercializing people going out to the moon and establish a nice transportation network. And it's called a cislunar economy. Cislunar economy is basically getting a supply line that goes back and forth between the Earth and the moon. Just like a cruise ship would have, or a container ship would have a supply line between different continents down on the surface. You establish a supply line up to the moon, and then maybe we have a lunar city in 20 years. Who knows? And then once NASA's done with that, then they're going to go to Mars and, hopefully after that, do the same thing over and over and over again until we get further and further in space. It's actually pretty damn smart. It's a pretty good idea. But I'm going to shut up. We'll go back into T-minus 8 minutes here. The next thing is the Atlas V poll for terminal count, which should be happening in about 1 minute, 15 seconds.
Nominal and contingency
Boo, it's a great question. That's why they're doing this.
During the ascent profile.
NASA's trying to open up the floodgates. Now, I can give another example of when this has happened in the past. The U.S. government in the 20s and the 30s, 1920s and the 1930s, came up with the idea of paying aerospace companies, aerospace startups at the time, because planes were a new thing in the 1920s, relatively new, right? They talked about paying commercial providers to move the mail around, okay? So the government started basically doing the same type of thing that NASA's doing now with moving mail around. That's why, they had the China Clipper and the Boeing Clipper. They were flying boats that would move mail around the United States, and they could land in water. You could land in any city. That program kicked off basically the commercial aviation industry, and then that coupled with World War II really kind of bolstered in the modern commercial airline services. World War II brought in the jet engine. That was the big one. So it started with, and look at how big the aviation industry is today. See what I'm talking about? All you got to do is just kick the snowball down the hill. All it takes is a little bit, and then it'll just cascade out, and hopefully it does for the better. Anyway, I'm gonna get to the go no go.
Has gas. Go. Electrical system. Airborne.
Go.
Ground. Go. Facility. Go. RFFTS. Go. Flight control. Go. GCQ. Go. Op support. Go. Go.
Chat.
Umbilicals. Go. Arm control. Go. ECS. Go. Redline monitor. Go. Quality. Go. Op safety manager. Go. ULA safety officer.
Go.
Vehicle system engineer. Go. Anomaly chief.
Yeah, I can't have the Brits
Range
in
coordinator. Clear to proceed. Flight director. Houston flight is go. Launch director.
You have permission to launch.
Proceeding with the count. ALC, verified T0 is set for 22:54:47 Zulu.
Let's do this.
By the 6 minutes.
And Lauren, you heard it there. It goes all the way across the board. The clocks are set, and we are ready to pick up the count on time for a liftoff here in just under 6 minutes. And Lauren, I'll just tell you that we have executed the status check many times. We've pulled for launches to the Sun, the Moon, Mars, Jupiter, Pluto, all manners of Earth orbits. Every mission and every countdown is unique.
Speed up. All right. Sometimes the stream gets a little bit desynced. I'm going to fast forward us a little bit, make sure we're caught up. Preparing to fast forward. Prepare to fast forward. Fast forwarding, sir. What am I looking at? When does this happen in the launch? Now. Chat, you're looking at now. Everything that's happening now is happening now. Then? Oh, you just missed it. When? Oh, just now. When will then be now? Soon. Okay, we're good.
Complete, and the computers are going to take over the automated
Go
countdown.
faster.
-4 minutes coming up
Fembo.
in just about 30
Thanks for the
seconds.
subs, man.
4 minutes and 30 seconds.
Okay, 4-minute 30. Let's do
Just
this.
a beautiful shot there.
The next thing here is that they're going to release the 4-minute hold in 20 seconds. Once they release the 4-minute hold, that basically is run launch into space.exe. Boom. That's what that is. That basically hands off from there. Now, don't get me wrong.
On my mark, the time will be T-minus 4 minutes.
They're not using
Count.
Windows. Rockets don't use
3,
Windows to fly into space.
2,
Not
1,
a good idea.
Mark.
Okay, we're hands off. Let's do this.
3:55.
Ground pyros enabled.
Dan, ice cream.
Ground system ordnance
Hey,
has been
Celtic.
enabled.
Who's Mark? I don't know. Ask Clarence or Victor. Okay.
$3:30. Atlas hydraulic at flight pressure.
Okay.
Atlas's hydraulic steering system has been pressurized for flight.
So they have 2 hydraulic jacks basically on each side of the rocket engine. If you know 12, 3, 6, and 9, they have one at 6 and 9. Nice. And that helps pivot the motor. That's how they steer the rocket engines. You need something as strong as a hydraulic to do it. So him confirming hydraulic levels means that the thrust vector control system is good to go, meaning they got a steering wheel, so to speak. That's kind of important. You need that.
3 minutes.
3 minutes to launch.
3 minutes.
Securing LO2 topping.
Okay.
Pressurizing Atlas tanks.
Topping of liquid oxygen in the Atlas has now completed, and Atlas
if you
propellant
look,
tanks are pressurizing for flight.
Atlas is no longer venting. It is no longer sus. They closed off the liquid oxygen tanks because the tanks are at the right pressures required for launch. These tanks need residual pressure inside of them for structural stability. Basically, think like a soda can. Soda can, if it's open, you can crush it really easily, but if it's full, it's a lot stronger. The rockets use that for structural integrity, so they can make the walls of the tanks a lot thinner, and you can make the vehicle lighter. Because the less rocket that you have on your rocket, that means you have more fuel on your rocket. Less rocket you can have on your rocket, more fuel you can have on your rocket, means you can go further into space. More efficient that way. Yeah, Baranok, the cameras are not ideal, but we're 120 seconds out for the OFT-2 launch.
1:59.
154.
Vehicle internal.
The first stage, Ken, not the second stage, Moto Kid.
Start. 150.
Securing Centaur LH2.
Okay.
Securing Centaur LO2.
Centaur hydrogen and oxygen are now at flight level, and topping is being terminated.
140.
Okay. They shut off the fuel lines.
137.
STS armed.
Flight termination system is armed. That is basically the ejector seat for the most part. If something goes wrong, the rocket will detonate itself and the capsule will fly away. It's a little different than the launch escape system, but
OC is armed.
that's usually one of the last things that you do. Here we go. Denny? Yep, remember to F5, guys. That's important. Turn SAS on, also important.
EDS armed and ready means the emergency detection system is now armed.
1
and
minute.
that basically just
Thanks,
means
Ed.
that if it detects something,
Status
it will
check.
trigger the
Range
launch abort system on Starliner
Okay.
and fire
54.
automatically.
Range
The
operations
spacecraft
started.
would push itself far up and away from the rocket. We're talking a mile up and a mile out in just a matter of seconds.
Range operations coordinator has reported that the
Certainly
range
don't
is green.
expect
Basically,
to
that's air traffic control for the rocket. The ATC, so to speak, says you're good to go. Stand by for the final status check here. T-minus 30 seconds.
30.
30 seconds.
Centaur at flight press.
Vehicle is now pressurized for flight.
25.
Status check.
Go Atlas. Go Centaur.
Go Starliner.
All systems are
Here we
to
go.
liftoff.
Go Starliner.
We got green across the board, guys.
10, 9, 8, 7.
Stand by for the sound suppression
6,
system to turn on
5,
here.
4, 3.
Sound suppressor is on. Got a good ignition.
And liftoff.
Send it.
Starliner is headed back to space on the shoulders of Atlas, powered by a workforce
good.
dedicated to its success.
Sep, look good. Go, baby, go! Here we go! I like the camera shot. Good attempt.
Confirmation of a good MET epic timer on Starliner.
Okay. Vehicle executed the roll program. You see how it's rolling comparatively to the ground. That's to find the proper flight azimuth for proper orbital inclination insertion.
Down to maintain acceptable dynamic pressure on the
crew on board today.
This is the first planned throttle down for Atlas in preparation for max Q.
The RD-180's throttled back in preparation for maximum aerodynamic pressure. Basically, what that means is that the Starliner at the nose can't move the air out of the way fast enough.
Atlas will face during the uphill climb.
So what happens here, because Starliner can't move the air out of the way fast enough, it actually compresses on the front of Starliner and causes the rocket to kind of crunch a little bit. You don't want to crunch the rocket too much, just a little bit, right? So they throttle back the engine for this part of the ascent. It's called going into a throttle bucket. And we should have a RD-180 throttling back up, so they're out of the throttle bucket. The reason why they call it a throttle bucket is because the throttle goes down and then it goes back up. If you're looking at like telemetry, it looks like a bucket. I know, engineers, right? So the next thing we should have solid rocket booster flame out here in a moment.
And we have burnout on both SRBs.
Good crew module forward link connection.
RD-180 is throttling back up to full thrust.
Okay, they're going to tow the SRBs here for a second till they get high enough out of the atmosphere where they can jettison them and not have to worry about it hitting the rocket.
Burnout, you'll soon see those two solid rocket boosters separate from the vehicle.
Kind of breakneck, yeah, for the most part.
Atlas V now weighs just 1/2 of what it did at launch.
Never.
Burning propellant at a rate of 2,800 pounds per second.
They're not reusable, guys. They're one-time use. Should have the jettison here. There it goes.
And we have indication of SRB jettison.
Okay, stand by for the pitch maneuver here.
Atlas continues to ascend using solely the RD-180 engine. That's about 850,000 pounds of thrust at sea level.
Well, Atlas is on its way out, guys. It'll be replaced by Vulcan, which will have reusable engines.
RD-180 is throttling down slightly as expected. Engine response looks good.
Teams here on the ground confirming Starliner has a good trajectory. We're now 2 minutes and 55 seconds into today's flight.
Next step in the flight here should be booster engine cutoff.
Kilometers.
It's closed cycle, Ren. No.
Our
RD-180s are closed cycle.
Will be to control acceleration forces, limit forces on the crew to below 4 Gs. That is safe for an extended period of time.
What's the deal with Vulcan and Smart Reuse? The deal is that United Launch Alliance got a $10 billion contract worth 38 Vulcan launches.
1 minute to Bico.
They're going to need more engines, so they started to do Smart Reuse. Yep.
RD-180 is now throttling to maintain 3.5 G acceleration on the vehicle.
Hey, keep your hands and feet in the vehicle at all times, X1011. Hey, you don't want to put your hand outside right now. Not a good idea.
Altitude of 80 kilometers
and make sure your seatbelt is fastened. What's wrong with you?
Moving at a rate of 1,187 miles per hour.
Charlene just launched out of Florida here. Cape Canaveral.
It's just passing North Carolina and Virginia off the northeastern seaboard.
It's going northeast.
Those of you watching along the coastline, you might be able to see this launch.
John, it's the same orbital, it's the same ground track. This flies on a little bit of a different ascent than SpaceX. Okay, we have our telemetry up. They switched to telemetry view.
We have Bico, booster engine cutoff.
There's booster engine cutoff. Stand by for Centaur separation. This part right here will. There we go. Now
we have successful staging.
Successful
Pre-start on
staging.
the RL-10s.
Okay, we got a good aerodynamic nose cone jettison there. Now, fellas, this is graphics, obviously,
We
right?
have ignition on both RL10s.
Kerbal 2 do be looking good, though. No, these are graphics here, but this is interpreting live telemetry. So whatever this thing does is pretty much what the real one is doing right
There's
now.
several milestones.
These numbers are all real time from the actual
reporting that
vehicle.
all are looking good. Ascent cover jettison there. That provided that
And we have
aerodynamic
airstrip
structure to
jettison.
the top of Starliner, protected the docking equipment during ascent.
But that's not me, is it? Like, do we have like a couple of loops? Nope. They're just playing 2 loops over each other.
Now that Starliner and Centaur are free of the atmosphere, well into the vacuum of space, that aeroskirt has been jettisoned.
Yeah, see? Like I said, look at all the struts. Look at all the struts that hold that sucker together. So, the flight azimuth is 48.4. They're doing a slight dog leg into space. This number should be about 51.6 at main engine cutoff here. They're downrange 720 kilometers. Velocity is 4.9 kilometers a second. That number you want reading about 7,600. That's the magic number for orbit here. Altitude 146 kilometers when we are at an elapsed time of 358 seconds, meaning that
Now 6 minutes into today's
6 minutes
launch,
into the
Starliner
launch.
continuing to accelerate up the North American coast. Everything going smoothly so
Centaur
far.
does not have very high TWR, but you got to
Starliner and
remember
Centaur
that this is a
taking further
dual
asset
engine
milestones
Centaur.
right on track, including the booster stage separation, Centaur ignition, and aeroskirt jettison. Number of status calls we'll be listening for in the next several minutes, but if all continues to go well, the next major milestone to watch out for is the main engine cutoff, when Starliner will be officially in space.
They didn't last time they showed it, Smuck. Let me put it to you like that. This is interpolating that this is a interpretation based off of the actual telemetry. Now, notice up here that some of these numbers changed a little bit. Now you have apogee and perigee. So, apogee and perigee are the highest and lowest points that you can have with an orbit. The difference between these two numbers is the difference between the type of orbit that you're in. Right now, if the perigee is negative, that means you're not staying in space for very long. That means the lowest point in your orbit is 400 or 4,000 kilometers below the ground, meaning you're going to come back down. Yeah. The higher the difference between these two numbers, the more eccentricity you have in the orbit. So,
Flight control teams are also monitoring the performance of the sublimator on Starliner right now.
Yes,
the
the
sublimator is what is used to control cabin temperatures going up to space and coming home. Normally we use the radiators on the service module, but those are not powered up until we get into orbit.
Reported over performance on the booster. I noticed that it's not lining up with the mission timeline. They lofted a little bit, which is okay. Maybe, Ozzy. So these numbers, the closer these numbers are to each other, so like apogee is set at 157 right now. If they set perigee, if you burn to 7,600 meters a second, that'll get you basically perigee and apogee relatively the same. If they're the
we
same,
heard confirmation that St. John's abort zone is open.
If they're the same, that means you're circular.
Pre-select these splashdown zones in the case of any needed aborts. The first one would be off the coast of St. John's, Nova Scotia.
There I am. I'm
We
right
just
there.
heard the flight dynamics officer report everything is pretty good.
Wave. Everything is pretty good. It's an industry term. What are you doing inside then? It's cloudy.
Flight controllers here in
Thank
Mission
God,
Control
baby.
confirming that our main engine cutoff time is
I'm still
looking
here,
stable.
but it's
It
also
is
where I grew up.
going to be 11 minutes and 50 seconds into the flight.
I don't know, Ryan.
We are
Maybe.
now 8 minutes and 50 seconds in, so that's still about 3 minutes to go until we hit that milestone.
So Centaur has a really long burn time because Centaurs don't have a lot of thrust. They don't make a lot of thrust. The reason why they don't make where they lack in thrust, the reason is because where they lack in thrust, they make up for in efficiency. Those two engines right there are burning liquid hydrogen and liquid oxygen. So first of all, the byproduct of the engine is water. That's pretty... Can't have carbon emissions if you're not burning carbon, baby. No, the second part of this is that hydrogen is one of the most efficient propellants that you can use. And because it's more efficient, these engines are some of the most efficient chemical rockets that we have flying of all time. Like it doesn't get much better than an RL-10. So what it lacks in thrust, It makes up for an efficiency. So even though the burn time is a little bit longer, it's much more efficient.
The Shannon abort zone will be open.
I like Starliner.
Now, you can see on your screens that Starliner is making its way up the North American coast, just starting to go into the Atlantic Ocean, northern Atlantic Ocean.
Okay, see the inclination number. They flew a little bit of a dogleg trajectory
our
here.
Flight trajectories, so we would not abort a crew into the middle of the ocean. They'd be near enough to land for quick and speedy recovery. So we're still in that St. John's abort zone. Expect to hear that Shannon open
this
call
is
coming.
money, dude. I love this. We got the numbers.
And we just heard that call.
Mason, what do they mean?
Shannon now open. So Starliner could potentially make that abort landing off the coast of Ireland now if needed, but so far no reason to think it will be. Starliner currently 153 kilometers above the Pacific Ocean, the Atlantic Ocean.
The rockets use RL-10s?
That's
Yeah,
about
matched them.
95 miles.
Delta uses RL-10s. And SLS, too, kind of by proxy. Windows 10. Dude, they have the desktop now, so come on, man! Can't you maximize the damn window?
60 seconds to Miko.
Bro! What are you doing? NASA, please!
We are 11 minutes into today's flight.
Oh my god.
Centaur and Starliner are passing Mach 23. Mach 23.3 and counting.
Okay, see, like I said here, 51.6 is the number that they're going to aim for.
Altitude of just under 150
They hit
kilometers.
51.6, and they use the reaction control systems on the Centaur to keep the rates basically aligned, so they're at 51.6. Note how the inclination is changing in the 1,000th decimal place now instead of the 10th. We are almost to main engine cutoff
main
here.
engine cutoff when both of the dual engine Centaur
They're straight up
are scheduled
playing
to
two
shut
loops.
down. That again is coming up at 11 minutes and 50 seconds. About
Okay, we almost got
5
positive
seconds away
here.
now.
Here we go. Okay, we have positive perigee.
And we have Miko 1.
Perfect. Now Centaur will pop the
Centaur
capsule
engine
off,
cutoff.
and
RCS is
Starliner.
main engine
100%
cutoff.
4SL.
Right on time. Starliner is in space, but not done with the ascent milestones.
Starliner will use its own engines to
Keeping
finish
in
that
mind
up
it
and
was
get
a
it
good
to a
main
nice
engine cutoff.
circular orbit.
The next milestone that we'll be looking for is launch vehicle separation, when Starliner will separate from Centaur booster and fly on its own.
ULA ain't out of the
Even
woods
after
yet.
that happens, we'll
Capsule's
have
got to
about 15
separate.
minutes until our final major milestone in today's ascent, the orbital insertion burn that will raise the perigee, or low point of Starliner's orbit, out of the Earth's atmosphere. So stick with us, we're not done yet. Now 12 minutes and 30 seconds into today's flight.
Well, they separated apogee. I gotta look at the telemetry.
We just heard
For
our
the most
Atlas
part,
console
yeah.
position report a
Why don't they finish
spacecraft
orbit with the
separation
Centaur?
for 1450 after launch.
Still about 2 minutes away.
Okay, we got a little bit. Well, they
Now, right
why don't
now,
they finish the orbit with Centaur?
ULA teams are confirmed.
Disposal orbit. You don't want the Centaur going all the way into space with Starliner, so they put it on a suborbital trajectory so it'll come back down and burn up. Yeah, it's going about 17,000 miles an hour. You don't need to worry about that coming down. That's going to get obliterated.
Are moving to their insertion checklists.
You ideally, Alucard, would want to separate right before your apogee, but from what I can tell from the telemetry here, it looks like they're going to set near apogee. So this is altitude versus relative velocity up here. Yeah, this is that's your first stage right there. This little thing to the right, that's SRB flame out, and then that's the second stage right there. Note how altitude versus
60 seconds to spacecraft set. Centaur has now achieved its separation attitude.
altitude versus, I think that's mission
Just under a
elapsed
minute
time.
now to go until the launch vehicle separation. The team here on the ground reporting
Range.
that Starliner
Yeah,
and
altitude
Centaur are
versus
both
range.
ready
So
for it.
downrange, got it.
In the right orientation and on a stable trajectory.
Okay, note that it launched at 51.6 degrees. When I say 51.6 was the magic number for your inclination, well, that means every time Starliner, when it's in orbit, crosses the equator,
30
the
seconds
angle,
to Starliner separation.
the angle between the tilt of its orbit and the equator is 51 degrees. That's called orbital inclination. Basically, the ISS is in a nice tilted orbit relative to the equator, and Starliner has to be in that same tilted orbit to get even near the dang thing.
Centaur is holding attitude for Starliner separation.
Okay, we're getting a slight acceleration
10 seconds to
here.
separation.
That should show an apogee increase here. We got a burn from the not the RL-10s, from Centaur's attitude control. See how it's put the apogee numbers going up. Now it's stopped. There we go.
And we have confirmation of Starliner separation.
Okay, telemetry indicates good separation there. That's good. Starliner's RCS should be firing now for...
Starliner is flying alone on its way to orbit. Confirm good LV separation. Thanks, ULA, for a smooth ride to space, and thank you, Dylan, for your help on that ascent commentary.
I don't know, John. That's right, Hypersonic.
That milestone behind
That's
us, the
ULA's
next one we'll be
control center
watching
there.
for is that orbital insertion burn. That is going to raise the perigee, or the low point, of Starliner's orbit out of the Earth atmosphere, putting it in space for its full orbit.
No problem,
That's
George.
an important milestone to reach. It's going to be a 45-second burn. It'll change Starliner's velocity about 85 meters per second, or 190 miles per hour. And that's going to be coming up at the 31-minute mark in today's orbit. We're now just under 16 minutes into today's flight, so still about 15 minutes to go for that.
So there's a number of things that flight controllers are working on right now. They're transitioning Starliner from its launch mode over to its orbit mode. That includes powering up things like antennas, heaters, and those radiators that I mentioned earlier.
Note, Sunny Williams is up there. See, she's an astronaut that was monitoring the telemetry on the vehicle. She's an astronaut that helped design
good targeting
Starliner.
for orbital insertion,
NASA
a good
astronaut.
forward command link, and a good MET epoch timer.
This is Atlas Space Operations Control. That's in Cape
Starliner
Canaveral.
making
It's
its
down
way
the
over
street
the
from
North
the launch
Atlantic.
pad.
Some other things going on right now. They are powering down some what's called demonstration flight instrumentation. We have some extra sensors on there.
So, you know, okay, for some people, Hip, I see your question. And people, why did they use L instead of T? Well, why did they call the booster, and why do they call the Centaur second stage engines the main engines? Well, that's because that's the naming convention that they used. That's literally it. I don't mean to give you a Doug DeMuro response, but honestly, that they used an L system when configuring mission operations for Atlas V. SpaceX uses T. NASA uses T. It really depends on who engineered the vehicle and who set the naming convention. Every project, i.e. every launch vehicle, might have a slightly different naming convention than others. Like, for instance, on Soyuz has 4 boosters and then a center engine, right? You'd think that you have boosters and, you know, your center core is part of the first stage. Well, no, that's wrong. On Soyuz, the 4 outer boosters are the first stage, and the center booster is the second stage, and then the third stage is up on top, what we would call a second stage over here. It really is how you set up your engineering and what naming convention you used and what type of terms did you use. It doesn't matter. You can use T, you can use L, you could use Q if you want. It doesn't really matter. But that for Atlas, they use L, and for Atlas, they call the RL-10s their mains. I don't know. Because they like to? That's just how it was named.
Hold a very specific attitude, which is exactly the attitude that we need for that orbital insertion burn, as Brandy mentioned earlier. We want that 85 meters per second of delta V to be going in exactly the right direction.
Sure, AC.
And so the colors you're seeing on your screen,
Right. The colors you're seeing on the
That's
screen
right,
are
Shinar.
indicating
Yep.
Starliner's track right now.
Which would be a fourth
Starliner
stage,
is currently coming
right?
up on the coast of Europe and is about 224 miles. 139 miles, 224 kilometers above the Atlantic Ocean as it makes its way to the topmost or highest part of this orbit. It will be
So you can see the ground station Shannon right there. That's
heading,
what these are.
southeast over Europe and a little bit of Africa in the next few minutes as it begins its
Is this more
journey to start
efficient than
catching up
Falcon
with the
9 in
International
speed and
Space
getting into
Station.
orbit?
Again, one of the major...
No, Trojan. They're both going to the same place. You need an X amount of energy to be able to get into orbit. It's called C3. Every rocket to get into low Earth orbit needs the same amount of characteristic energy. You need to be able to accelerate your rocket to a certain speed to get into space. But they all have the same C3 for more or less for LEO insertion. You need the same amount of energy to get to the same place, right? Now, now, some rockets might have more delta V than others, but you need the same amount of C3 no matter what. Just like you need the same amount of delta V to get into space. It's not so much one's more efficient than the other. You need the same amount of energy to get to the same spot. Thermodynamics do be like that. It's a real pain in the butt. But no, I'd say Atlas V uses more efficient propellants, but that doesn't necessarily reflect characteristic energy. You could have the same amount of energy that Centaur does in a first stage or a second stage. It's just stored as hydrolox or Carolox instead of hydrolox, like Falcon 9, for instance. No one is not more efficient than the other. You need the same amount of C3 to get to the same spot in space. The audio's off. Just wondering, what rocket had the most stages?
Look at the number of teams who have been supporting today's launch all across. I
don't know off the top of my head.
All across the U.S.,
right?
in particular here in Houston. If you hear of the flight director Mike
Oh,
Lammer
nice.
and Rick Hempling, who's been assisting him, particularly with weather observations. And earlier, you saw several of the teams who have been supporting from the launch site in Florida.
So, that's William Shatner. That has to be William Shatner. I need William Shatner in Mission Control, by the way. No, I'm just kidding. Guys, there's a telltale sign here for Mission Control, right? And what you want to really look for in Mission Control, because they're not necessarily going to tell you if everything is going fine or not. A telltale sign that something has gone horribly wrong is if you see people in Mission Control doing this. If they do the not like this. Let me see the not like this emote. If you see people doing that, that means something's very wrong. I don't see any of that from any of the mission controls just yet. Now, if something kind of went wrong and you encountered a new type of behavior, you usually see something like this. That's weird. With that being said, I don't see that happening anywhere here in Starliner's Flight Control Center. So that's a good thing. That's a good thing. No, not like this, because the last time they went to launch this, there was a lot of that. There was a lot of, you know. Yeah, Tan, exactly. Yep, everything looks okay here. Because like I said, if something goes bananas, they ain't gonna tell you. Now these guys ain't out of the woods yet. This is Starliner mission control. That's Boeing's mission control. So these guys are still watching that spacecraft to make sure that the orbiter maneuvering system does the circularization burn, or else Starliner's going to come back down real quick.
It is otherwise very quiet on the flight control loops, which...
That's a good thing.
As Lauren said earlier, silence is golden.
No news is good news, man. Nah, it's bad juju, Jax. I don't want to do that. Is this a land center or a mission control center? I'll let you decide. Look at, they got RGB lighting. You know, that adds. That makes the computer go faster. True story.
Guidance Navigation Control Officer confirmed that Starliner is moving towards that OI attitude and will begin holding for orbital insertion.
Okay. GNC says everything is good. GNC is Guidance Navigation
With that,
Control.
we're going to take a minute to pause and toss it back to Lauren in Florida, who I believe has a special guest there to talk with before they wrap up their coverage for the day.
Ooh, 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 ooh!
Hey, Brandy, thank you very much. Yes, joining me now is NASA astronaut Sonny Williams. Thank you so much for being here, Sonny.
Thanks. It's great to be here today.
And I have been following along. I've actually been able to see you from my perspective up here. I saw you in the moment of liftoff. You had your game face on. What was going through your mind at that moment?
Yeah, it's pretty amazing.
Thank you. Thank you. Whoever did that, thank you. You're the man.
Country who are supporting this, you know, of course here in Florida, but then back in Houston and Denver. It's just a huge team to get this thing off the ground and to get Starliner into flight. So At the moment of liftoff, I have to admit, though, I was thinking about what it's like to be sitting inside of there. So, unabashed to just imagine what it will be like for the next launch when we have people riding in Starliner and this
Current
Atlas
heading.
5 being a
Rates
human-rated
for
rocket.
YPNR over here.
Yeah, we heard the guys earlier saying they were jealous about Rosie.
Absolutely.
Well, just a few months ago, we were talking about how much confidence you have in the Atlas 5 rocket. And what made you say that?
Oh,
yeah,
that's
we've
sick,
been here
dude.
a couple times watching launches, of course, not only for Starliner, for OFT, the first time around, but
or 15
also
subs,
for other
man.
payloads
Thank you.
that have gone up on the Atlas 5. And, they're pretty expensive. I told
There's
my mom
mission
at one
elapsed
point in
time
time,
right here.
if they're putting that expensive payload on top
I'm
of
not
that
sure what
rocket, I
TIG
feel
means.
pretty good about that. And I know the team, I've been here, talked to a lot of people who have worked on this.
It looks like
this
KSP,
rocket,
doesn't it?
Both here in
Right?
Decatur, for example, as well in Denver. And I understand the engineering, or at least I tried to understand the engineering that goes into this complex
Deb.
machine. And, they are
What's VGO?
A-plus, people doing just such a great job. So I know that their hearts are with us and ready to launch humans into space.
I'm not sure what
We
VGO
are waiting
is.
for that orbital insertion burn. It is a very important milestone for Starliner.
Yeah,
what are you
see.
watching for here?
Yeah, we just want to make sure that that burn goes off without a flaw. We get circularized around the planet, and then we can all take
Velocity
a
to
deep
go.
breath and let the spacecraft fly for a little bit and get ready for the rendezvous profile for the ISS. So I think that is really what
Time
we're
of
waiting for, just
ignition.
to make sure it's going to happen
I
correctly.
expected
which,
more from
all
KSP
indications
too.
are great. The spacecraft is working well.
Now, Sonny, I see you at the office quite often. I see the guys
Yeah,
at the office
time
quite
to
often.
ignition.
You guys really have
TIG.
worked
Mission
closely
elapsed time,
with the
time to
people
ignition.
who
It
have
says
their
it.
hands
Oh,
on the
thank
spacecraft
you.
day in and day out. What does that relationship mean to you?
It's huge. Like I mentioned, during the days leading up to this, I really
Oh,
was
this
just
is
thinking
sick.
about
I
the
love
teams.
it.
All of the hard work that they've gone.
I just want to make it very clear here. I don't want to interrupt Sonny too much, but this is live telemetry from a spacecraft being streamed directly to your computer. I'm just pointing that out. Like that's pretty freaking cool.
Key. I feel like I
That's
just want to
pretty
stay
neat,
committed
man.
to them to make sure that we get to the finish line with getting people to the International Space Station.
And so, as soon as you guys finish up here tonight,
From
what
space,
happens?
yeah,
Where are
right.
you going next?
Oh, heading back to Houston. Mission Control in Houston right now has the spacecraft, and we want to watch the rendezvous profile. We're also, all three of us are sort of sitting in the shoes of, or in the seat of Rosie. Wondering
that
what
might
it's
be
going to
a
be like,
feet
and
per second,
what the
I'm not
spacecraft
sure.
is going to see, how it's going to act in all of that rendezvous profile. So we'll be right there following along. So it's going to be an exciting 24 hours. I'm racing
this
back.
is
I'll
like
be
the
home
nav-
tonight
it's
to
the
be able
nav
to
ball
be
in the
in
maneuver
mission
node.
control in some capacity watching.
Time
just
to
like
maneuver
here,
node. How much
watching that
delta V
rendezvous
it
profile.
costs?
And can you tell us much about
Starliner
what
is
would
like
happen
freaking
between
Kerbal.
now and cruise flight? What kind of training do you have to go through, and what kind of things are we going to be working on with Starliner?
Right. So this mission is going to prove, we're going to learn stuff. Not everything is
Yeah,
going to
Jim,
go
I
100%
think you're
correct, right? We learn stuff
BTI
every
is
time
burn
we
time.
take something to space. And so we're going to take those lessons
104
learned
second
from this
burn.
mission and apply it to the next launch, which is the crewed flight test.
VGO
But
total?
even beside for that, we have testing that we're ready to go do.
Oh, I see. So this is your velocity. This is the maneuver node. The maneuver node is spread across axis. So this is going to be an 84.1 meters a second delta V burn on the x-axis, which is the main axis of the vehicle. But for a little more precise insertion, they're also going to have to do some lateral, the blue, and transverse, or up and down, basically up and down, left and right, not forward and back. So that's forward and back, that's up and down, that's left and right. You need, because it's measuring burn in 3 dimensions because you're in space. That's really freaking cool. Burn time total is 104 seconds there. I really, really wish you'd put that back.
So we're going to work through all that choreography of how we're going to work together in the spacecraft.
Well, Sonny, your time is valuable. I really appreciate you joining us here.
Needed
I
to
know
help,
you need
yep.
to get back down to the console and follow
Radial and
along.
normal,
So
those are the words
thank
I'm
you for
looking
being
for.
here, and we are going to continue to follow along the loops here at the ASOC and wait for that orbital insertion burn, which is basically when Starliner will be up in orbit, hanging out,
Because the
until we're
joystick's
ready
better, don't
to
you?
start the rendezvous process and docking tomorrow. So for now, that's it for me and Sonny, and as well as Dylan Rice here in Florida, and we'll get you back over to Brandy and Josh in Houston.
No hands on face here. Oh, except that guy, but that was
Thanks
only
so
for a
much,
second. We're
Lauren.
good.
And great to hear from Sunny. We're now just about 2 minutes away from the orbital
I agree,
insertion
Novus. I like
burn.
the
That,
telemetry.
again, is going to be a 45-second burn. It's going to raise the perigee or the low point of Starliner's orbit out of the Earth's atmosphere and get it into a stable orbit. And after that, we'll begin checking out the critical control systems before tomorrow's docking.
Oh, this is great. Oh, this is fantastic.
Minute and a half until the orbital insertion burn. Starliner is in the burn attitude. You might have seen earlier the nose of Starliner might have been pointed down towards the Earth, but that's actually the attitude that it needs to be, because as it orbits around the Earth, it will no longer be pointing at Earth. It will be pointing at that specific point in space that the orbital insertion burn will send us to.
Basically, if it's pointed down at burn ignition, by the time it finishes the burn, it will be pointed in the
And
right
once
direction.
again, there'll be a
because
lot
you're
of
orbiting
thruster
around the planet.
activity. We want those 4 aft-facing
I
OMAC
agree,
engines,
Helpers.
that's about 1,200 pounds of thrust each, to be pushing in exactly the right direction.
OMAC standing for orbital maneuvering and attitude
not
control.
really.
They're going to fire for
Doing
45
lasts right now, guys, is
seconds for
probably
this burn.
not good. I want to watch this.
Changing Starliner's velocity by 85 meters per second or 190 miles per hour.
It's probably just for telemetry. There's
30
no way
seconds
they're
to go
rounding.
now
There's
until
no way
that
they're
burn
rounding
ends.
orbit signer to a single decimal point. That's just the UI. 20 seconds till OMAC ignition. This is for an for orbital circularization here.
Orbital insertion burn starting in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Stand by for the call for good OMAC ignition.
Again, this burn is going to last for 45 seconds. Teams here on the ground reporting 4 good orbital maneuvering and attitude control thrusters.
Okay, everything looks good here. The Delta V is going down. This is their projected trajectory
Now the
here.
colors you're
That's
seeing
their
on those
actual.
jets, or you were seeing on those jets, they indicate which integrated propulsion controller those jets are mapped to. We have 3 IPCs, integrated propulsion controllers. OI cutoff in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Oh, that's so freaking cool, dude. I love how they have the color of the thruster
And we
exhaust.
have OI cutoff.
Comparative, like it shows the blue thrusters are for up and down, the green are for left, right, red is forward and back. That's actually really freaking cool. Stand by for a call for an OI. Velocity left over is 0.0.0. It seems to be right on the money.
And we have confirmation from Flight Director Mike Lammers. We have a good orbital insertion burn. Starliner is in a stable circular orbit on its way to the International Space Station. Now, this was a big hurdle to get through early on. We have a few demos to go on our way to the ISS. And then after that,
that's a load off.
Hopefully a very good docking. But so far today, good launch. Great performance from ULA. Atlas even gave us a little bit more of a push than we needed, but Centaur was able to
locked the
adjust
trajectory.
Place Starliner exactly where we needed it.
That's an unknown. You better
And
figure
we
out
have
why it did
confirmation
that.
of a good OI burn. Once again, Starliner is in orbit.
OI,
heading to the
orbital
ISS.
insertion.
It's a major milestone to get behind us, but it is really just the beginning. We've got a number of demonstrations now
That's
that
what it's all about.
Starliner will have to go through ahead of its International
There's the
Space
ground
Station
track
arrival.
right there. See, Starliner's catching
So
up.
we're going to start pretty much right away with a checkout of the Vesta systems.
I agree, John. So a couple of things here showing on the ground track here. This is the orbit that it's currently in. That's the projected next 2 orbits here. This is the day-night terminator right there. There was a satellite in the center of the screen. That was a tracking data and relay satellite, and that satellite is staying right in the center because it's in geosynchronous. That was one of NASA's communications satellites. That Starliner is most likely communicating through right now. I don't see if we have a screen that tells us if what satellites were handed over through, but oh no, I don't think a lofted trajectory would make up for that small of a difference in mass.
We're now in control and controlling the
Lower
thermal
orbit.
environment
Lower
inside the
orbits
cabin.
go faster, guys. It's in a lower orbit. It will catch up to the ISS. If it's in a lower orbit than the ISS, it will go faster. The further you are into a planet's grav well, the faster you need to go to stay in orbit. As you get further and further
Going back a
away,
little bit,
your
just
orbital
to help
velocity
you guys
will
learn a
go
little bit
down,
about
but your
Starliner,
orbital
going back to
period
those
goes up.
IPCs, that blue, green, and
Yeah,
red
the rates know
is
this.
what
It's so freaking cool.
propulsion controller. Each of those thrusters are
This is
mapped
pitch
to.
on roll relative to
So
horizon. That's
if you think of the
so
flight
cool,
controllers
dude.
like the brain of Starliner, the IPCs are kind of like the nervous system, translating kind of those commands into movement.
That's right, Switch.
So we'll see
Everything's
the team
looking good,
continue
Rogue.
to exercise those
It's starting to get warm in here.
throughout the flight. Next up are a couple demos, but
Jado!
I think for now we'll wrap
What did they
up here in
launch?
Houston.
Starliner, Boeing's crew flight capsule. Nobody's on board. This is an orbital
That's
flight
right. With
test
that
of the
last
OFT-2.
milestone safely behind us, we're going to say goodbye for the night.
No,
The Starliner
no,
team here in Mission
no.
Control
Don't
will
you-
be
don't-
monitoring
don't-
continually as Starliner
don't you
makes
dare.
its way towards the International Space Station. Right now, Starliner is about 118 miles above the coast of Africa, heading towards the Indian Ocean.
Bless the
and
rains.
with that, since the next destination for Starliner is going to be the International Space Station, we're going to get an update from Gary Jordan down the hall in the
Gary!
International Space Station Flight Control Room. But that is it for Josh and I for the night.
I know, Simon.
That was a great launch, and we are excited to see Starliner on its way. Gary?
Gary?
Hey, thanks, Brandy and Josh. It is so great to see Starliner in a good orbit and heading for the International Space Station. Teams
Gary's
here in the
cool.
Space Station Flight Control Room will be monitoring Starliner's approach over the next 24 hours to dock with the orbiting lab. In
There's
that time,
Starliner,
it will
there's the
perform
ISS.
activation and checkouts of various systems, a few
There's
early
pad view.
demonstrations of its thrusters, guidance, navigation, and control equipment, as well as its communication systems as it executes a series of burns to gradually raise its altitude and get closer to the station. Tomorrow, be sure to tune in for our coverage of the approach and docking phase. When we get inside the approach ellipsoid, or about a 2-kilometer marker from the station, we'll see a few critical demonstrations of the Starliner to verify some of the spacecraft's capabilities to keep astronauts safe. We'll see station astronauts command a hold of the Starliner, and we'll see the Starliner perform a retreat maneuver in the approach corridor. After today's successful
we're definitely
launch, we're
gonna be here
targeting
for
to
that.
start
That's
our
really
coverage
cool.
of Starliner's approach to the station at 3:30 p.m. Eastern Time tomorrow for a docking scheduled for 7:10 p.m. The International Space Station crew is expected to host a welcome ceremony of the spacecraft to the station the following day, and we may get some peeks inside the Starliner. It'll be a busy week here in Houston during that docked phase of Starliner, and there's a lot to do. In the meantime, that'll do it for us here in Mission Control Houston. With that, I'll send it back to Derek.
Skylon, Gary, is there something you're not telling us?
Thanks, Gary. I'd like to thank the launch and flight teams across the country for making this day possible.
By your
But as
command,
you've heard many times, we know this is the first of many critical milestones for this test flight. Once docked, the Starliner will undergo a number of checkouts, including battery charging, transferring files through the space station downlink, hatch open and close, and cargo transfer. And of course, all of these demonstrations will provide the data needed to bring Boeing closer to having the privilege of carrying astronauts to and from the space station.
And NASA astronauts are certainly looking forward to that. The docking that you mentioned, scheduled for a little bit less than 24 hours from now at 7:10 p.m. Eastern Time. And while we're talking schedules, make sure you stay tuned for our post-launch news conference at 9 p.m. Eastern Time on our website, nasa.gov/live. And NASA,
enough,
Boeing,
Bree.
and ULA leadership will be on hand to answer questions about the OFT-2 test flight up until this point in time. Until then, and then afterwards, you can find updates at nasa.gov/commercial crew, all one word. And then, of course, you can follow us on Twitter, as you can see there on the right-hand side, at @commercial_crew.
We leave you now with
Thanks, NASA
another
Clark
look
Kent.
at the launch of Orbital Flight Test number 2.
But before we do that, I got to compliment that jacket.
No.
That's a nice jacket.
That's right.
Yeah, it's looking good. Keep your eye on it.
Yes.
'Cause somebody might burgle it from you if you're not looking. For D. Russell, Boeing, ULA, and all of us here at the NASA Kennedy and Johnson Space Centers, I'm Daryl Nail. Have a good night, and remember to keep looking up.
That was weird. What the hell am I looking at? When does this happen in the launch? Now. You're looking at now. What'd you do? I switched off the stream. No, you switched off the entire thing. To put it back on. Put the stream back on. No, don't look up, Alex. Oh, there we go.
2 minutes.
159.
Vehicle internal.
Okay, we're back. And we have the combination. Schlotkin. Go back to the golf course and work on your
Securing
putts.
Centaur LH2.
Securing Centaur LO2.
Someone might burgle you, Maggie. Oh, that was a good footage. That was good footage of the launch, guys. Thanks for that. Are you serious right now, or? Okay. Don't worry, guys. I have it on the other monitor.
OC is on.
Thank you, media feed, baby.
EDS armed and ready means the emergency detection system is now armed.
Yo, you know I always have coffee when I watch launches. You know that. Everybody knows that.
And fire automatically.
PLP started.
Push itself.
Keep your eye on it, Maggie.
Rocket. We're talking a mile up and a mile
I like that
up.
EJ badge. You should make sure nobody burgles it from you. Should make sure nobody burgles it from you. That's weird. It's a little bizarre. It's a little strange.
30 seconds.
Centaur at flight press.
Pressurize for flight.
This is a replay here.
Check. Go Atlas. Go Centaur. Go Starliner.
All systems are go for liftoff.
Go Starliner.
Yeah, Grab Shark. It's not so much Clark Kent anymore. It's more Patrick Bateman at this point.
7, 6, 5, 4.
So we got a nice replay
3,
here.
2, 1, and liftoff. Starliner is headed back
Looks
to
good.
space on the
Everything looked
shoulders
real
of
good
Atlas,
there, man.
Powered by a workforce dedicated to its success.
All right, Alex. See you, buddy. Nice attempt, but also the flag blowing into the camera is
epic timer on Starliner.
not ideal. There's the roll program. So why don't they just make it so Centaur and Atlas take Starliner all the way into orbit?
Heads up position if you had crew on board today.
What? Atlas?
This is the first planned throttle down.
Centaur? Well, that's so Centaur doesn't get stuck in space.
Max Q, maximum dynamic pressure on the vehicle.
There's 39A over there on the right, and then 39B.
Right now, atmospheric forces are the highest Starliner Atlas will face during the uphill climb.
Mach 1, Atlas 5 and Starliner are now supersonic.
No, and heck, this one went okay. It actually, dude, you know it's actually pretty cool. Like,
rocket boosters will run out of fuel and burn out.
they were, dude, Boeing had the balls to show the telemetry right on stream, and I do very much appreciate that, honestly. Yeah, they had the stones to show the telemetry, and I'm not talking like, oh, this is how fast it's going. I'm talking like they had straight up the straight up had the telemetry on screen. All the roll rates, the next maneuver, like everything that has to do with maneuvering this thing. They put it right up on the screen for everybody to see, which is a pretty Chad move, if I do say so myself. That's a pretty Chadly move. That's pretty awesome. Yeah, so you have your rates here. There's your yaw, pitch, and roll attitude relative to horizon. That's your maneuver. Velocity go. X, Y, and Z delta V numbers right there. Burn time, BTI. Over here is your time till ignition on the burn. We saw it execute its OMAX circularization burn right here. And they had all the telemetry going. It's really cool, actually. I wish, now what I'm waiting for is to them just put this back up on a feed here, on the media feed, so we can watch it. That's really cool. I could watch this all day. Yeah, Mechreel, isn't it cool? That's actually really neat. I think that's really, really freaking cool. Yeah. It looks like KSP. It's strange. And, like, I'm not just saying that. There's your nav ball, right? Look. Yaw, pitch, and roll. 45, 75, 135, right there. There's your rates are over here, so this would be in the aerodynamic menu right there. Your degrees radian right there for yaw, pitch, and roll. That's your delta V on 3-axis right there. That's really freaking cool, man. And this is your change in heading here required for the burn. Jet select, service module reaction control systems right there. That's really freaking cool, man. Pretty much what I do with the internal stuff at work, just watch live telemetry feeds. I wish SpaceX would put that up there, Devlin. Yeah, that's cool. That's really cool. Anyway, guys, that's going to conclude the coverage. Fellas, once again, I'll be honest. I had to get up really early to do more house stuff, so I'm getting